to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do.
Mr. Hamilton, can you say your full name for the record?
Yes, Mark L. Hamilton.
And did I tell you you'd probably be testifying after lunch?
You did, yes, ma'am.
And did you anticipate putting a suit on before you testified?
No, ma'am.
Did you? Did I just call you a second ago and tell you to get up here in 1 minute?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I apologize for that. Welcome. Can you tell the jury what you do for a living, where you currently work?
I work for General Cody Wong. I'm an investigator here, doing mostly technical investigations.
Okay, I want to go back through your work history, okay? And I want to start from the beginning.
Okay.
So in 1986, if you would consider that the beginning, I'm not sure. In 1986 to 2009, what were you doing?
I was in the U.S. Air Force and then later in the U.S. It was Air National Guard, Tennessee.
What did you do in the United States Air Force and Tennessee National Guard?
We did communications engineering, ground radio communications, and then later I was doing engineering installations all over the world.
Okay, will you remember throughout your testimony that if they're anything like me, we don't speak your language?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let's make sure we break some things down. I've already told you my IQ in this field is low, so let's go slow, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what are ground radio communications that you were doing as a specialist in the United States Air Force?
So it was a mixture, basically anything that doesn't leave the earth. So we didn't work on aircraft. We worked on all the launch sites, air traffic control systems, air traffic towers, mobile, even the fire engines. A lot of it was stuff like post-nuclear attack, stuff that works after the nuclear bombs go off and all the radios are gone. This stuff still works. So it was a SAC, Strategic Air Command.
In a technical way, what are radio communications?
They're basically just the transmission of electrons in waveform, and frequencies can be way variant. So it's all the way from super low to up in the microwaves, like the split wave and above time. But they're just waves of energy.
What training did you have to have in radio communications before you were in this capacity with the Air Force and the National Guard?
Well, the military side, we spent the better part of a year just on the technical subjects. There's no history or English, but it's electrical engineering minus the non-fun stuff.
And what is electronics section of 241 first 241's engineering squadron?
So we had two sides of the house. One was installations, which are the guys that are putting up towers, telephone poles, digging ditches, and putting fiber optics. And then I was over the side, which is electronics, which is all the radio communications careers.
Okay. And then later, did you move to a position with the city of Chattanooga?
I did. It was in parallel with when I went in the Guard when I came off active duty. I was a radio engineer at the city of Chattanooga.
So was that from 1989 to 2002?
Yes, ma'am.
For approximately 13 years?
Correct.
And working with the city of Chattanooga as a radio engineer, what were your job responsibilities?
We took care of all the communications for multiple cities, actually. So fire, police, ambulance, public works. So mountaintop repeater sites, handheld radios we repaired, mobile radios, built this 911 center we currently have. I was involved in the new build of that. So all the dispatch consoles had a lot of microwave networks and a lot of mountaintop repeater sites that we took care of.
What in the world are microwave networks?
Well, they're just short, micro meaning small, so they're real high frequency, like our microwave oven that's a microwave. And we take that same signal that's cooking your food, put it in a dish, put information on it, and send it across the valley.
So when you say microwave, you don't always mean an actual microwave, but it is a microwave.
Yes, it's short, so high frequencies.
Okay. And then in 2002, after leaving the city of Chattanooga, did you join the Chattanooga Police Department?
Well, I'm still a city employee, but I'm lateraled over because technology in the forensics world especially was really starting to go with the cell phones, and the police department kept borrowing me from the communications shop, and so they just finally just moved me over there.
I see. So you're saying in 2002, with a new technology being created, the Chattanooga Police Department was using you so much, the city of Chattanooga just said, hey, go over there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So my title changed. I still work for the same entity, but my title changed.
Sure, I understand. What was your title at the Chattanooga Police Department?
I had 2 or 3 of them, but at one point it was covert surveillance, and it ended up being forensic technician.
Forensic technician?
Yes, ma'am.
And what, as a forensic technician, were you doing at the Chattanooga Police Department?
Cell phone forensics, video forensics, audio forensics, about any kind of technical device, cell records analysis from the providers.
Do those type of forensics involve inspecting and interpreting cell phone data?
Yes, ma'am.
What about cell phone records?
Yes, ma'am.
What about location data from cell phones and other items?
Yes.
Who were you primarily doing those things for at the police department?
As in which division?
At whose request would you do them? Who would give you a cell phone?
Generally, most of that work came out of homicide, but I worked for the whole department, plus I assisted 6 or 7 outlying agencies. But yeah, most of my heavy workload came out of homicide.
And what was your involvement in audio and video?
So a lot of times they would call me out to a crime scene. In the early days, it was VHS tapes that were called time lapse. It was awful. Later, as digital came along, they would come into the crime scene a lot of times to collect. The crime scene would collect a cell phone off of whomever and sign it over to me on the scene. At the same time, I would go in. If it was a business and had cameras, I would go in there and retrieve the video of the incident.
And then in 2019, did you join the Hamilton County District Attorney's Office?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that before I was at the District Attorney's Office?
It was.
And before we get any further into your experience and qualifications, I'm going to address an elephant in a room, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
You work for the District Attorney, is that correct?
I did.
That is me, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
When you testify later today, would you ever testify to facts or evidence just to help the District Attorney's Office?
Absolutely not.
In fact, do you often have to give prosecutors bad news when it comes to criminal cases?
I do. I just give the truth.
Okay. Just wanted to cover that.
Yes, ma'am.
So going back to your qualifications, can you explain some of the training? What's in front of me is 2.5 pages long, so I don't know how you're going to summarize it. But can you please try to summarize your training for the jury?
So, of course, I had my military training, and then when I was at the city, I did a lot of schools that were provided mostly by Motorola in communications equipment. So I traveled a lot to go to schools. Then when I moved to the police department, I took dozens and dozens and dozens of classes, especially as this technology was growing. Everything from how to interpret cell phone records, certifications in cell phone forensics, so you can understand the inner workings of phones. I even took, even though I did it so much, I was probably better than the instructors, but I took a repair course on cell phones, so that I would often, people would break their phone, and I would rebuild it and extract the data.
Did the Chattanooga Police... I'm sorry.
I was just saying I'm certified in all kinds of different careers.
Okay. We will get there. What did the Chattanooga Police Department, did they ask you to go to all of those trainings, or was that voluntary? How did that work?
No, ma'am, I was kind of a one-off. It was all new, so I just sort of mostly drove that from the bottom up. And we had access to narcotics funds, which is in so.
Which is what, I'm sorry?
It's useful because you can use it for training and equipment, so I spent a lot of dope dealers' money.
Okay. What is NATIA?
National Association of Technical Investigators.
And is this association recognized nationwide?
Yes, ma'am.
Do they host trainings?
They do it was an annual training in a different city every year.
Approximately how many of those trainings have you attended?
I can't recall. It was a number of them.
Beginning in the 2000s?
Yes, ma'am.
Did those trainings include training on digital forensics?
They did. They would have a list of classes, and then you could pick. You had a whole week of it. You just picked the ones that you wanted. You just go to that class for the day or two, or however long it lasted.
Okay. And have you been, what is the USAF? Is that the United States Air Force?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been certified by the Air Force as a fiber optic network engineering and installation expert? Have you been certified in local area network engineering and installation by the United States Air Force?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you, off the top of your head, know of other certifications you've received?
Yes, there's a bunch of them. Probably the biggest thing is I was eventually qualified. You have qualification levels, like 1, 2, 3. I was qualified as a 9 level in the Air Force, meaning I could supervise or work in any career field that was technology. So I got to the top of that list.
What
I'm
is,
actually still in the reserves at almost 60. They can call me back if they need.
hope that doesn't happen.
I have to talk to my wife.
What does Motorola factory certified mean?
So we have very specific, very expensive, like the repeaters on the mountains, and even the handheld radios are $6,000-7,000 back in the day. But you would go to Schaumburg, Illinois. The other classes were down right outside of Miami, and you would sit in their classroom, and you would learn that one specific line and how to repair it, and how it worked, and keep it running.
You're certified in that?
Yes, ma'am. Multiple mobiles, repeaters, handhelds.
Over the years in your training, have you been trained in forensic cellular downloads?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been trained in cellular data locationing?
Yes, ma'am. Multiple different courses in that.
What the words that I just said, what does that mean? Cellular data locations, probably not the words that go together. I'll have you describe that.
Well, the providers, i.e. like T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, they potentially had to, under FCC rule, figure out where you were, especially before GPS was big. And so they have different ways of arriving at your estimated position. And that becomes important on criminal cases. It's not important to them so much, except they use it for engineering, find bad towers or dead spots. They need to add a tower, but we use it for criminal use.
You were asked to locate people before there were cell phones. Is that right?
Yes. And I've had to help even the FBI find a terrorist phone that they couldn't find. And I did.
When was that? In your days in the
That
Air
was
Force?
when I forgot the date, but it was when our military guys got killed here on Anacola Highway.
You helped in that operation in terms of
Yes,
cell
and
phones?
the FBI came to me and they couldn't find his missing phone, and I put him within 100 feet of it right next to their office.
And as times have changed from when you didn't have any devices that allowed you to locate individuals, have you received training in cellular device location as it's progressed throughout the years?
Yes, ma'am.
There's something on your resume that says GPS devices in March 2011. Was that a training?
It was.
You've also been a part of the FBI digital imaging and video recovery team.
Yes, ma'am. I was took training from them.
What's Hawk Analytics?
So that is a product that ingests the records the providers give can be very cryptic and huge, and we had to do it by hand. That product was developed just specifically for law enforcement to be able to take like a T-Mobile provider record and ingest it and make it in a readable, human understandable format. It's called CellHawk. And so I'm
CellHawk.
certified in it, yes ma'am. It's actually involved in this case.
You are certified in CellHawk interpretation.
Yes ma'am.
What is CellBright?
CellBright is a product that downloads your cell phone and extracts all the information. And some people probably remember back in the day when you would go to Verizon, you got a new phone, and they were flip phones. They had a black box that they would transfer your phone numbers from the old phone to the new one. That's a CellBright phone. And somebody along the way went, "Hey, we're getting that data. We'll just put it on our thumb drive, and now the police or whoever can use it." So it's a product specifically engineered to extract a lot of information from a cellular or any mobile device.
Are you able to interpret records from CellBright?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you done that in many cases before?
Thousands, probably. Yes, ma'am.
And have you received awards and decorations from the United States Air Force?
Yes, ma'am.
Many.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever testified as an expert in a criminal case?
I have.
Do you know how many times?
I've never counted them, but it starts in the early 2000s. It's hundreds.
Have you testified in each criminal court in the Hamilton County Courthouse?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this point, I would tender this witness as an expert in digital forensics and radio frequency engineering.
Please be recognized, expert field of digital forensics and radio frequency engineering. Thank you. Thank you. The last time.
Would the court like for me to continue?
Story lunch here? Not here yet, please. We'll go till lunch gets here.
Okay. All right. DVD, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's start from the beginning, Mr. Hamilton. Can you turn around, look at the screen behind you? I just want to start by, well, before we get to this slide, let's do this. Can you tell the jury what the difference is between a phone, a cell phone, and a SIM card?
Yeah, so the phone is the radios. It's basically just a collection of radios, Bluetooth, and 4G, and 5G. It's the hardware. The SIM card is that little tiny ceramic card, and that is basically the identity of your account. So this a phone number is tied to. But it actually does have a little computer in it. It can store a tiny bit of information, just a few contacts and things, but basically it's a secure chip that the radios in the phone communicate with and then talk to the network, and the network validates you and says, oh, that's so-and-so. And so it basically is your phone number.
Is there a difference between a forensic download of a cellular device and cell phone records from a provider?
Oh, absolutely, yes, ma'am.
What is the difference between a cell phone download, how we would refer to it, and records such as records from T-Mobile or Verizon?
So the cell phone download is kind of like you would expect. It'll have pictures, locations, calls, text, all different apps, and it's kind of just in chronological order. So it's usually very large now because these phones hold a lot of data, so you can get 500 gigabytes off these phones easily. The records the provider give us are basically just spreadsheets with columns and rows of who called who, what time, what day, what tower you used. So they're a bunch of spreadsheets. Mostly.
Have you been trained in cellular location data as it relates to towers,
Yes.
cell towers?
I have.
Do our phones track us?
They do in two different ways. There's a GPS in there that Google and Apple and everybody are tracking to see where you go and what you do. The cellular company's not tracking that. They're tracking which towers you're using and which antennas you're on for engineering purposes.
Okay, so if you are trying to learn, if I travel from here to home, and you were to receive my cell phone records, it wouldn't necessarily show my path home, but would it show the towers that I am near?
It would show the towers and antennas that your device communicated with, yes.
And when you say device communicated with, what does that mean?
It's not all the time, so you may start downtown and maybe hit one in the middle and then one or two up at the end, but you might miss some.
What causes our phone to communicate with towers?
There's a myriad of reasons. Now with these smartphones, it's your stock market updating and your plus your device announces itself all the time so that they can't light up every tower in the country looking for you when you get a phone call. That would just wreck the network. So your phone occasionally just comes out and says, here I am. So they know when you get a call to go to that tower first and try it and see if they can get you, because that's where it will last heard your phone. But yeah, they're talking, if they're on and working, they're talking on the network quite good.
Okay, so you're saying that any activity that occurs on our phone, as little as a notification from a news outlet, would connect in some way, that might not be the right word, you can tell the jury, connect in some way to a cell phone tower.
Yes, it can and will, but it's not continuous, so it's not like you're tracking somebody minute or by every 10 seconds. It might be some gaps in there, a few minutes.
And do our phones record that activity?
The phones necessarily don't, but they do at the provider end. Their computers store all that.
Okay, so I just misdescribed the difference between the phone and the provider records. So the provider would keep those records,
Yes,
such as T-Mobile.
yes.
Okay, and approximately how many cellular towers are there located in Hamilton County?
I could not answer that. It's thousands and thousands of them, and each one has multiple technologies. So you may see one tower shared with 3 or 4 providers, and then there's multiple antennas. So you can literally have 50 different radios running off of one tower.
Okay.
It's a lot. It's overwhelming. When I get the database with all the towers in it, the records are in the hundreds of thousands of towers.
All right, so now I think we're at this slide behind you. Can you tell the jury what we're looking at there?
Yeah, let's just give everybody an idea of generally the towers are in the.
Make sure, Mr. Hamilton, that you speak as loud as possible for the jury,
Yes,
just for
ma'am.
the jury.
So actually, I think they can see it.
So these towers generally are 3-sided, and so when we get the records back,
You'll get a basically a 1, 2, or a 3. So it'll be tower number 99, and it'll tell you it used like antenna number 3, which will be these guys here. But they generally break them into 3 spots. A lot of them they do 120 degrees, so they cover a 360. But if you have a shopping mall or a high density area, they put the towers where they make money, so they might point all 3 antennas in one direction to put them into, say, a big shopping area. So it's not, or as we have here with these mountains, they don't want them covering the valley from the top, so the ones up at the top will actually all face onto the mountain. Doesn't mean you can't talk to it from behind it, but it's just the main lows. But this just gives you an idea of there's 3 sides to them, and So these different size antennas are probably all the same provider, but that's gonna be your 3G or 4G, or nowadays it's 5G. But yeah, they're generally around, have three sides.
Okay. In this slide, what is the jury seeing?
So this is kind of, just give you an idea of the way the signals come off that tower. They overlap, even though they're three distinct sides. That's not a perfect laser unit. It kind of stands out. So that just gives you an idea they're designed to cover everything around them.
And then what is different, what's depicted in this photo different than the first photo?
So you'll see on some of these maps, the LTE antennas, which are going to be your data on the 4G, they don't put three sides on them. They just put a stick up, and that guy just radiates in a circle. So it's like all three sides together at once. So it just sits there, and the signal's equal all the way around it. So we can't tell what side of the tower they're on when it's on the data. You'll see a circle instead of a triangle, and that's tells us what tower, which antenna, but we don't know if it's north, south, east, west.
Let's start talking about this case in particular, the case of
Yes, ma'am.
State of Tennessee versus Jason Chen. Were you asked to work on different forensic downloads, digital forensics, audio, video, cell phones? Were you asked to work on this in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you do that, do you also consider other, what we would call discovery, which is evidence in a case?
Yes, ma'am.
How many hours of work would you say you've put into this case when it comes to what you are an expert in?
I would guess 60 to 70
60 to 70.
hours.
Okay. And when you did you examine both T-Mobile records in this case
Yes, ma'am.
and Verizon records?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you do that, in the records themselves, you touched on this, so let's go back to it. In the cellular records themselves, what all are you able to see?
So in the records, there's a lot of information up there. It has the name of the owner, generally. It tells you a lot of specifics about the account, the devices. But then you get into call detail records that show who called who texted who, what time and date, potentially what tower it was using in what area of the country at the time. And then we get, there's just multiple spreadsheets. Another one that we get estimates of where you were. And that's, you'll see that here. Some of them we just have a tower. Some of them we have a tower and an arc, which I'll explain later, but you'll have a line and you should be somewhere on that line. And then some of them you'll see a circle, and the circles are in different diameters by their quality. So when they get a real good signal, they say it's pretty accurate, or not, it'd be a big circle. But all of that's contained in spreadsheets. So it's just columns and numbers and letters.
Okay, were you aware, when we're talking about the T-Mobile records in this case, are you aware that the records that you have in your possession are only from a shortened period of time?
Yes.
And Investigator Bulkley has already testified that those records are from the week of November 22nd, 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What changes in cell phone records if items are deleted?
So if items are deleted on your phone, I guess you're asking, because you can't delete the stuff that the provider has.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so nothing happens. No matter what you do to your phone, it's already there. It's permanent. It goes nowhere. It's in there.
Are there records that you can remove from your phone, or I guess that would change based on what you're doing on what a person is doing on their actual cell phone?
So you're asking on the physical device, can they change it?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
What is what is that? How does that work?
You can delete stuff, or you can just reset the phone to factory new, and it's completely irrecoverable at that point. It's gone. So
If-
that's yours. You can manipulate it a lot.
What if you reset your phone? What does that do to the records themselves?
The only thing it would change is both. I know Apple iPhones were involved in this, and they do what's called iCloud backup. So your backup is kind of an image of most of what's in your phone is stored at their server. So if you go wiping it, your next image is going to have whatever you have today, but they keep multiple copies. So when if you restore it, you can go pick a date. I don't know how many they keep, but that would change. But as far as what the provider of records, like what towers you used, and they also sometimes, and we got them in this case, they send some of the text message content, and that won't change no matter if you delete it on your phone or not.
If a phone is reset, do the records reflect that?
No, not exactly. At least we didn't get them because you'd have to get them from Apple. And but what we see on the provider side is some information showing that there's some changes. But where we actually see an iCloud backup is in the actual device download, where the physical phone was put on the cell right and downloaded.
Okay.
And that does show when and what happens.
Okay. And on this slide, does this is this accurately describe the records, the cellular provider records that you reviewed in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And are the phone numbers correct that are attached to both the T-Mobile records with Jason Chen and the Verizon records with Jasmine Pace?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's give the jury, are we still good, Your Honor?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So now I know that this is difficult to see for the jury, and I wish I could zoom in, but I can't on my PowerPoint. So I'm going to have you, and this is just for demonstrative purposes.
It is, yes.
This doesn't contain any information that we're specifically trying to point to today. But can you just describe for the jury sort of what you're seeing here?
So this is just one of the typical spreadsheets we get. And it's showing the start and end time. It shows some numbers here that will become important here later. And I make them all a phone. It tells us which switch, the market it's in, which is kind of like big counties. They have, like here in Chattanooga, we actually use on Verizon, we use the switches in Atlanta. So we're in the Atlanta market. But this stuff starts telling me which tower and then which antenna we use. So you'll get what's important mostly is what time of day and what antenna and which market it's in, and I have a list of all the towers so that I can match.
So would it be accurate to say that on the left column we can see dates and times, correct?
Yes.
And then you would also be able to see in the records such as this what tower, would the left side be activity on the phone?
Yes. This is date and time, and this over here is which towers you're using.
Okay.
And antenna.
So for all this activity, which is just simply activity throughout parts of 11/22/22, the cell phone towers are all the same. Can we not see that on this?
Yeah, you can. Yes.
Okay.
This is all the same, so that's pretty indicative of a phone that's not moving or not moving much in that little print of that one antenna.
Okay, and you'd agree under subscriber that we've got Jasmine Pace's phone number?
Yes.
Is this the way, is this how you are able to track a phone location based on the cell phone towers that the activity is connecting to?
Yes, this is one of the ways, and the other one is a document which I don't have. It's just like this, but it'll have an estimated latitude and longitude. And I guess now's a good time to explain that. But GPS, like we're used to when you use something to navigate on your phone, is generally accurate now down to about 15 to 30 feet. These towers are rough, so they're not GPS. So when you see a circle, it may be 500 feet, and they're estimating you're in that circle somewhere, but it's not GPS. So you'll see latitude and longitude, but it's not GPS. So it's not very, very accurate. It's roughly accurate. Sometimes it can be off quite a bit. So it's not a thing where I can say you were in this house. I can say you're probably in the neighborhood or on that block.
Understood. So this is an example of the records that you would use to determine the location of a cellular device. Is that
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
Okay. And then we have another example here, except these are Mr. Chen's T-Mobile. This is an example of Mr. Chen's T-Mobile records. And again, I apologize, but is there similar but we've got a little bit more on this, so is there similar information?
It is, and this is when I was talking about where T-Mobile's estimating where this device was. It's not me. So it tells you date, time, who, and basically what happened, calls or a text or whatever. But what's important right here, those are the tower latitudes and longitudes. But on over, you'll see they'll actually estimate your location at a latitude and longitude with a circle of a given radius, and they tell us that. So now we can map and draw a circle on the map of the right diameter, and they're saying it's probably inside that circle. They do that actually because they got told that they had to, because there wasn't GPS on all phones, and people would call 911 and say help, and they didn't know where you were. So they came up with this system.
Okay.
It actually measures the speed of light and multiple towers and guesstimates where you are.
Okay. Again, we don't speak the same language, but we're doing well here. Okay. Were you able to review the T-Mobile records of Mr. Chen and the Verizon records of Ms. Pace to determine their approximate locations the week of November 22nd?
Yes, ma'am.
In doing that, did you identify quite a few cellular towers that at different times their devices were connected to?
Yes, ma'am. There's a lot of them.
And on top of determining the location of their cell phones, did you also review other records from both Mr. Chen's and Ms. Pace's records that were provided to you by T-Mobile and Verizon?
Yes.
Like data used, messages, calls, etc.?
Yes. There's a whole string of spreadsheets you get with these returns.
Is it helpful to review other records on the phone to corroborate a location?
It is somewhat, not so much the location, but the dates and times, because these phones, especially where we live, we're right on the timeline, and the phones will jump in and out of Central Time. The records, a lot of them are stored in what's called Greenwich Mean Time, or ETC, which is in England. And part of the year, we're 5 hours behind them, and part of the year, because of daylight savings, we're 4 hours. So it's nice to take the record, find the same call or text in the phone and match them, and know that your calculations are right. We're on subtracting 5 hours. Some of these call sheets are in the accurate local time, so you have to have a good understanding of how AT&T or T-Mobile or whoever, what they provide you. You got to know how to read it.
In forming your opinions in this case, did you use other evidence to corroborate those opinions, or to even make those opinions?
Yes, ma'am. So I used somewhat looked at the phone download, but I mostly used some videos that were available in the discovery to corroborate the location.
What about text history?
Yes.
Is the location data, as you are going to describe it and explain it to the jury, is it inconsistent with anything that you located in the records?
No.
Or in the phone downloads?
No.
And this was just recently, I can't recall the exhibit. This was an exhibit from yesterday. I did not put I'm showing you a photo that's already been admitted into evidence. Oh, here we go. Exhibit 208. This is a photo of Ms. Pace's vehicle.
Yes.
You'd agree that this next photo is a photo of Ms. Pace's vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
And then Exhibit 171-2, would you agree this is a photo of Mr. Chen's vehicle?
I do.
Was it helpful to know what the vehicles looked like in forming your opinions?
Yes, because I was watching videos with nobody. I traditionally do this without any help or asking the case info, and so I needed to know what the vehicles look like. So when I watched the videos, I could find it.
Okay. Now let's begin chronologically going through location data that you were able to collect. And let's start with Miss Pace's phone on 11/22/2022. This is exhibit number 1. Have you seen this exhibit before?
Yes, ma'am.
What does this show, to your knowledge?
That is a screenshot from an app that was on her phone, and it records dates and times, start and stop.
When reviewing the records to determine the location of Miss Pace's phone on the 22nd, were you able to find evidence that corroborates this trip?
Yes, I was.
All right, so this is the first time of many that the jury is going to see a map that looks similar to this, okay? So this is when we have to sort of break it down for the jury so that they can understand it.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this a map that reflects Miss Pace's travel from 11:27 to 11:43 p.m. on the 22nd?
It does.
And that would also be the time frame on this My Chevy app, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what are the green circles or semicircles?
So this is that product called Sailhawk, and it'll ingest the records and do all this heavy lifting for you. So the circles, remember I was saying the LTEs are omni, meaning they cover all the way around, so we don't know which side of the tower. That's what these big circles here. And then when you see this line, it's hard to see, but that pie shape is going to be a sector antenna like we saw that covers generally 120 degrees. The coverage is not the green part, that's just showing you what direction it's facing. And the coverage of the circle ones is not the circle, it can be huge. It can have holes from ridges. But generally, like when you see this triangle, they're using the antenna on that side of the tower facing north. And its coverage is going to be out this way. So if you were traveling down this road right here, you would be hitting, these antennas like that. And it's very consistent that the path that's from the GPS in that phone on that record from my Chevy matches the radio signal I'm seeing and the timing. So this is rolling into, have you guys seen the map yet?
Sort of, but if you want to go ahead and describe for the jury, well, first of all, let's start here. Are you from the Hamilton County area?
I am.
How long have you been here?
Since the mid-70s when the Apollo program quit.
Okay. Are you extremely familiar with the geography here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we can see, would you agree that the furthest green, like you said, pie shape and semicircle, whatever, and circle, that is close to, or very, very close? That, yeah, what is that top? What is
So
that?
that's 5977, which is the Pace residence.
So is the map that we're seeing all the way from the Pace residence down to Mr. Chen's apartment?
It is.
And go ahead and describe that where we're at.
So this is Hickson. We call this around here North Chattanooga and Hickson. So this area down here where he's at, North Chattanooga, it's covered up. But right here, 110 Tremont Street's right in there. And you'll see eventually Walmart, 900 Mountain Creek Road. I've marked the pertinent locations. The body location is up here on the river, down in the county. Yeah, so basically this is the area that we're mostly going to be looking at, this lower half.
Okay, did you identify on there the significant locations for this case, like Walmart and the body location in Mountain Creek Road? Did you insert that?
I did, and there's a Walgreens here. It's kind of messy on this one because we're so zoomed out, but yes, the body, 900 Mountain Creek, Walmart, the drugstore down here, right next to Tremont Street, where the apartment is.
Okay, and the jury can see all of the times associated, which there's a lot of them. In fact, when we get to the bottom, they overlap each other. Does Cellhawk create those times?
It publishes them. The times are created by the provider. So in this case, the red ones are going to be Mr. Chen's, and the green ones are Mrs. Pace. And the times they come from those spreadsheets. So the only thing I physically did in this case is put those addresses and put a pin on the address, and everything else is automated by Setup.
Okay. And you just mentioned this, but we need to be clear, because this is going to continue throughout our time together here. The green is going to represent whose cellular device?
Jasmine Base.
And the red now and in the future is going to represent whose cellular device?
Jason Chen.
Okay. And did you do that so that we keep them separate?
Yes, it actually chooses the colors for you, but you can alter them. But yes, each phone number is a different color.
General, I've been advised that lunch is here, so we can set up, we can stop at home and cut you off whenever you're ready.
No, Your Honor, when we come back, I'll probably refer back to this slide to explain the next couple, but it's totally fine.
Okay, you ready to take a break at this point?
Sure, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the lunch is arrived, we're getting set up. 5 minutes after lunch, we'll take our usual hour, 15 minutes, so we'll resume this jury trial at 2:20.
And, Judge, will you let Mr. Hamilton know not to discuss his testimony?
Dave, you'll remain on the rest of your witness right now, and you have don't discuss your testimony. All right, please be seated. Counsel, you remain under oath.
Thank you, Judge. Sir, you look different than earlier. Are you the same Mark Hamilton that was testifying before lunch?
I borrowed the suit from the guy at home.
Okay, good. Okay, good. All right. I'm glad you're back. Okay, so where we left off, as a reminder, because we left off sort of right in the middle here. You had explained to the jury that the green circles or pie shapes from this point forward are going to represent Ms. Pace's phone.
Yes,
And the red is going to represent Mr. Chen's phone.
correct.
In this location, just a brief recap, this map indicates Ms. Pace's travel from her parents' house on 1122 to Tremont Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was there other evidence in this case file that also corroborated that travel?
Yes, ma'am. There's some video looking across the street.
This is State's Exhibit 128. Is this the video you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
At the time of this video, was Miss Pace's phone travel corroborative of the location of that vehicle?
Yes, ma'am. And the My Chevy out.
And the My Chevy, that's correct. So, and the My Chevy trip. They all correspond with the same timeline.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 7. Have you seen this before?
Yes, ma'am.
In the early morning hours of 11:23, can you tell the jury where Miss Pace's phone was located?
It is at this coordinate, which is a GPS internal to the phone that sent it. And so it'll be quite accurate, and that is 110 Tremont Street.
Okay, so we're still going chronologically, okay, Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, ma'am.
The next time that we see travel from Mr. Chen is when?
It's the next day.
And is it 11:23 or 11:22?
No, we're into 11:23 now. After she arrived was late on 22, and then pin drop starts in the early morning hours.
That's right, I said that wrong, I'm sorry. So after this event, when is the next time we see Mr. Chen's phone traveling?
I was in the morning time, I think.
At some point in the early morning, well, in the morning hours at 11:23, did Mr. Chen's phone travel to the Walmart?
Yes.
To your, from your memory, was that travel around 10:40 in the morning?
I believe it was, yes, ma'am.
Now, did Miss Pace's cell phone travel from Tremont to Walmart as well?
It did.
Were you able to see Miss Pace's phone and Mr. Chen's phone at the Walmart based on cell hawk information
Yes, ma'am.
that morning?
I was.
Okay, and have you seen this video that is State's Exhibit 18?
Yes.
Does this video corroborate Mr. Chen's cell phone location data?
It does, yes, ma'am.
Do you see Miss Pace in this video?
I do not.
And then again, Exhibit 18 is depicts Mr. Chen checking out at the Walmart. Does this video also corroborate Mr. Chen's cell phone records?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see Miss Pace in this video?
I do not.
Okay. All right, so now we've seen those videos, but this is actually some cell hawk interpretation. We explained to the jury what we're seeing here based on the videos that we just saw and the testimony you just gave.
Yes, and just to clarify, these circles are not like the ones we saw where a tower is that was showing an Omni antenna. These are actually the estimated location from the two cellular providers, which were T-Mobile in the red and Verizon in the green. Two completely different carriers are both estimating almost identical accuracy and location, and the center of that is the Walmart.
Is this how you were able to testify that both of their phones were at the Walmart around 10:40 to 11 o'clock on
Yes.
11/23?
That, and they both leave Tremont and kind of travel together, so it might not be exactly matched, but they're leaving and arriving about the same time.
Thank you, sir. The next slide is around the same time, also near the Walmart. Can you explain to the jury why this looks different, why the red dots are smaller?
Well, just at that time and period, there wasn't anything from the Pace phone, but what's even better is the tiny dots are much more accurate. So they know you're on these arcs by the time it takes the signal to travel, and where the arcs intersect is basically where they estimate you to be. And when you start getting these small, it's usually pretty accurate. Like we saw, the big circle covered all the Walmart and some surrounding stores. Now we're in the parking lot.
When the arcs intersect, you said that is when we can have a better idea of exactly where
Yes.
the parties are.
Yes, it's not always 100% accurate, but the one thing to remember, you have to be in the coverage of that antenna on that tower, so you're not going to be way on the other side of town. It might put you in the wrong parking lot, but it's not going to put you way off.
But the lines you would testify are arcs from the towers?
Yes, that's the range, so that's how they get this. And on the record, you'll see like 0.68 miles. It's usually plus or minus a tenth. And that's how long it took the signal to travel from that tower at the speed of light. They measure it that fast. It's really blink of an eye, but it works.
Will we continue to see the arcs throughout your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so again, at 10:47, you have documented in Cell Hawk, both of their phones are at or near the Walmart, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so let's keep going chronologically. Do you recall where the next location in Hamilton County Mr. Chen's phone travels to?
I believe he went up towards Suck Creek.
Do you know, sir, how many minutes it would take for a vehicle to drive from Walmart to Suck Creek Road?
Just 5 minutes, I'm guessing. I didn't actually measure that one, but this is the Walmart. And you literally just have to go up to this road right here and turn. It's very close.
So we see those little dots again, is that right?
Yes.
And is that indicative of pretty reliable, more accurate location tracking?
It is, except that's a very steep canyon with the river cut through it. And the tower is up on top of that mountain. And sometimes in here, I've worked more than one case in that area, the signal will actually bounce off of one of the walls and come back, which can put you further away. So like you see these dots up here, that's on the bluff of the mountain. There's no way to get there from here. It's quick. That's where the signal is bounced, so it's measuring the time that's too long. So the average of them, and most of them are on the road, which makes sense. But then all of a sudden it'll jump up here and back. That's due to that really rough terrain. Again, this isn't GPS, so. But when you've seen hundreds of cases, you start, and like I know up in there that they're going to, some of the long ones are going to be, and generally they're long, like up on this mountain. There's no way to jump up there. You got to drive up like a bunch of crooked roads.
So topography can sometimes affect
can.
cell hawk data.
Yes.
Okay. And
Works
then,
much better out in the metropolitan open areas, and when you get up in the canyon, it's a little tough.
can you again highlight with your pointer where Suck Creek Road is?
So Suck Creek Road starts right here and it goes down the river, and there's basically a vertical wall of rock pretty much. It's very skinny down there and it goes on out. But you just hit the road and then the mountain coming down to it and water. There's a few houses on either side, but that's about it.
Do you recall at this point where Jasmine's phone is?
It is not showing up at this time.
So what does that mean?
It just means it's not communicating with the network for whatever reason. Could be that it just didn't need to, or it could be turned off. Could be an airplane mode. Could be wrapped in aluminum foil, but it's not leaving a trail at the moment.
If the phone is off, does it leave a trail of location data?
No, ma'am.
Okay. If the SIM card is removed, does the location data, is it erupted?
It is. It is.
I'm sorry, interrupted?
Yes.
Okay. So there's multiple reasons why a phone can go, let's call it, from now on, let's call it going black,
Yes.
right?
That's a good time.
Okay. So that's around 11:05. Can you tell the jury where the next location is that Mr. Chen traveled?
It's back to the Walmart area.
Okay, and do you recall how long he stays at the Walmart area on that time? At that time?
Not off the top of my head. It wasn't very long.
At some point, does he travel back to the Walgreens?
He does.
At what time does he travel back to Walgreens?
I think it was around 11.
Could you refer to your note to
Yes,
refresh
ma'am.
your notes to
I didn't
refresh your
memorize all those
recollection?
times.
It's okay.
Yeah, I've got the notes here. Let's see here. We are up to the 115 slide. So the next one's 141. I think these slides got that ordered in there.
Well, let me just ask you this. We can clear it up.
Slide.
At some point later in the day, is Mr. Chen at Walgreens?
He is around 140, 141.
One second, Judge.
Yes, ma'am.
review, can you see the, can you point your direction in the screen's direction again?
Yes.
All right, so what is this, what's the jury seeing right here?
That is the Walgreens down on the North Shore, which is underneath those, basically underneath those red circles.
And on that red pie shape over there, what's the time saved?
142. This is probably 5 minutes of information there. I'm putting the time like at the first, but he may say, if you stay there a few minutes, there'll be more circles.
Okay, and then, reviewing evidence in this case, were you able to locate any records that indicate that Mr. Chen was at the Walgreens at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
The state, on the screen is State's Exhibit 20. What time in Eastern Standard Time is that military time?
1342 be 142 Chattanooga time.
So the cell hawk records that you've shown to the jury of Mr. Chen being at the Walgreens at 141 are supported by video evidence?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move to the 3 o'clock hour when we see Jasmine's phone pop up again. Well, let me ask you this. Where is Jasmine's phone at around 142?
I don't recall where that one was.
You don't recall if it was black or if it was
I
on?
think it was just off at that time because it shows it back up here a little bit.
Okay, so let's go to the 3 o'clock hour. Do you recall at the 3 o'clock hour any activity on either of their phones?
Yes, ma'am, I believe they show back up at the long one. At 350, both of them are actually in the downtown area. In the Chattanooga, not in Richmond.
Refer to the screen here. What are we seeing on Cell Hawk in the 350 hour, 350, 4 o'clock hour?
So just to orient you, Tremont would be probably right up in here. It's across the river. But this is downtown where we are now, and these two phones are both using similar towers. And it was, what I saw, it traveled from right to left, so heading from east to west. But this phone had been on for a while, and the red one was off, and then right about here, the red one comes on, and both of them show up at the same time in this downtown area. And this is all happening in the 350s. Some of these, those are estimated locations. These are showing the tower, but they didn't have a location.
Is it your opinion that at this time both of their phones are in the downtown area shown on the screen?
It is. They were traveling at about the same time in the same place.
Are you aware of any activity that you found on both of their cellular records around this time?
Yes, ma'am, there's a text message sent about right here.
And who was that text message from and who was it to?
It was from Jason Chen, a Jasmine Pace.
At 4:03 p.m., based on your review of the T-Mobile and the Verizon records, Mr. Chen texted Jasmine, "Hey, are we still good for dinner tonight?"
That's correct.
T-Mobile records. Approach me with one piece of paper. If you could review that and tell me if you've seen it before.
Yes, ma'am.
Where is this document from?
It's from the phone forensic.
The
It's the forensic download of Mr.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Hamilton. I've asked you already, but were you able to review the forensic download from Jason Chen's phone?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go through items on that phone?
I did.
Did it include this item?
It did.
And can you describe for the jury, they're going to see it, but it's in a different format. What format is that?
That's Celebrate. That's the tool that we use to download and to process the data coming out. So this is a Celebrate screenshot of the one page on it.
Your Honor, I'd ask that this be admitted as the state's next exhibit. Mr. Hamilton, on the screen behind you, is this what you're looking at?
Yes.
And
Yes, ma'am.
does Celebrate note the time that the text was sent?
It does right here, 16:03 TC minus 5, which would be 4:03 p.m. Chattanooga time.
Okay, and at the below it says body. Is that the body of the? Is that the text message?
Yes.
Okay.
It is, and this is who it's to. And then you infer this is Jason Chen's cell phone, so the from, they don't populate it there, but it's from him to her. And that's, hey, are we still good for dinner tonight?
All right, and in your review of the discovery in this case, did you come across another piece of evidence that corroborates both the location data and the cell phone, the text message
Yes, ma'am.
from the forensic download?
There, I did.
Showing exhibit 121 to the witness. Now, you can see this text message on the screenshot, but can you explain again why this says Wednesday at 3:03 p.m. and this one would indicate 4:03 p.m. in Eastern Standard Time?
Yes, ma'am. The reason is that screenshot was taken later, and the phone was up in Nolensville, and it was on Central Time. So the time, they automatically adjust to what time zone you're in as you're driving across the country. So the screenshot itself was taken up there, so it adjusted the times to Central in that phone. But we know it's forensically, the phone does everything in UTC time, so these reports coming off of Celebrate are accurate, and the records coming off of the provider are in UTC generally. So that describes that discrepancy just because of where the phone was when the screenshot was made of the message.
Are you able to tell the jury, so you testified, we're going back, you testified that at this time, approximately 3:50 something, that both of their phones showed back up in downtown Chattanooga, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to tell the jury if Miss Pace's phone had been on immediately before that, or is this the first time you see it back on?
No, it had been on for a little while.
Okay.
His was off and hers was on, and it was driving around the city.
Is it fair to say hers was coming off and on
Yes.
for the first part of the day on
It
11/23?
was. It went dark, and then it reappeared and rode around, and his was off, and then his and hers just come on almost exactly the same time. Flip-flop.
And to be clear with what you testified to a moment ago, Nolensville, Tennessee is on Central Standard Time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Chattanooga is Eastern Standard Time.
It is.
Okay.
And
Or-
the phone, the forensic tools tell you what time zone it's set to, and it was, I guess it was recovered in Nolensville and secured. It was actually processed down here, but it was still in Central Time when the report was made, but the report is always in UTC time, and so I have to go in the report tools and adjust it to what time zone I want, so that I don't have to do a bunch of math.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
After this, did Mr. Chen go back to Suck Creek
He did.
immediately after?
I don't think so. Well, he travels, it's not on that picture, but he kind of travels across the bridge and over that way.
He goes from downtown, would it have been back to the North Shore, you're saying?
Yes, ma'am,
It was just a few minutes off.
And did he travel back to the Sub Creek area?
He did.
Okay. What are we seeing in this photo?
So that is that same road we saw, just zoomed in a little more at Suck Creek. And so that's the body location up at the top, and that's him coming down that road again.
Would this be the second time on 11/23 that he's in the Sub Creek Road area?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, does he then go back to the area of 110 Tremont?
I think he went to, yes, he goes to Tremont.
Do you recall what time that was?
Not off the top of my head.
It's okay, these records are complex. Feel free to
Yeah,
look at your
sorry, I
notes.
didn't memorize them. It's 5:08 p.m. is when I see him.
Do these records reflect what you just testified to?
I do, and something to point out, see how this group gets a little bit north of him? I would, from long experience and having to locate, especially missing people by their phone, those dots all belong down here. They're just on that arc, and the inaccuracy of the pivot. I don't believe he was moving because it'll jump in seconds, and there's no physical way to do that. So these belong down here just in my professional opinion. He's in there, he's not driving around.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall when, how long Mr. Chen is here in the area of Tremont after 5:08 p.m.?
It was 50 minutes, I think.
Okay, and did Mr. Chen's phone begin to leave the area of Tremont around 6 p.m.?
It did.
Okay. In the course of your reviewing the discovery in this case, have you seen this video?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna, this is State's Exhibit 129. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger on the next slide for the jury. You reviewed this video, sir?
I did.
Is the time connected to this video approximately 5:59 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
And then is there another video, Mr. Hamilton, in which you can see what appears to be Mr. Chen's vehicle leaving Tremont Street?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that just a couple of minutes later?
It is.
Is this a screenshot from that video?
Yes, ma'am. That's a still screenshot of it.
Did you place that arrow on this?
I did, just to point out where the vehicle's at to start out in the video.
And Your Honor, that would still be Exhibit 129. It's from the same video. Do Mr. Chen's phone records corroborate him leaving Tremont at almost exactly this time?
They do.
Can you describe for the jury what we see here on the screen?
So that is the start down in here around 110, and then the traveling, and then up 27 highways, most direct route, and by the timing, I believe that's what it took. So that's basically him leaving out and getting up on the highway.
Does Highway 27, can Highway 27 lead you to Sub Creek Road?
Yes, ma'am, it can.
Is that the direction in which Mr. Chen's cell phone travels?
I believe so. By the timing, it would almost have to be.
Does Mr. Chen's phone arrive at the Sub Creek area around 13 minutes later?
It does.
Can you please, again, describe what we're seeing for the jury and show the jury where Sub Creek Road is?
So this is that highway that we just saw a little lower down here, and then you get off, and these again are going to be close. A lot of factors there, but the dots are traveling down Sub Creek Road towards the body location.
How accurate are the dots in this photograph?
The size of them, I don't remember the meters, but it's pretty small. Those are pretty good, but we know he's not driving through the middle of the Comanche plant. So again, this is not GPS, but the average of all of it is pretty accurate. If you're moving fast, it's usually not as accurate as if you're sitting for a minute. The problem here is there's not as many towers, and the more towers that are involved in the map, the better. And when you get in that canyon, you're kind of on your own with one or two. But the general travel direction's good.
Let's move forward to 2 minutes later. 6:15 on 11:23. Now describe for the jury why this looks a little bit different.
So this is just it's zoomed in more. These range rings that are on further out are where I was talking about it bouncing off of the vertical cliffs, and it jumps back and forth. But if you average all that together, it puts you pretty close.
And you testified about how long it would take to get from Tremont to certain locations, but did you actually look at anything on Google Maps to help the jury understand the distance between certain locations?
I did. I just ran a address from travel trip from point A to point B and let Google tell me, because they know the speeds and average travel times.
Is this a screenshot from the Google Maps?
It is.
And it shows that it takes how long to get from Tremont to Suck Creek?
13 minutes.
Does that corroborate the location data that you retrieved from Cellhawk?
It does.
Do you recall what time Mr. Chen departs the Suck Creek area?
It was not long. He was 6:33 p.m. when he leaves out of there.
All right, and do you recall, and this is him leaving,
Yes, so these dots are stuck. There's no good way to do this in court, but they're laid down consecutively, like in a video, and he's going out now.
okay, so based on this photo, you can tell that he's actually leaving the location of the body.
Yes, so this dot is older than that dot, so as you're going that way, which is at 6:33, he's headed out.
Do you recall where Mr. Chen's phone goes from this location?
Goes to the Walmart parking lot in Red Bank, same Walmart we saw earlier.
This is the same Walmart that he was at earlier in the day
Yes, ma'am.
that's nearby, is that correct?
It is.
Okay, and is there, I apologize, here we are. Tell the jury what we're seeing. This looks a little bit different. Looks like it's just zoomed in.
Yeah, he was in the area of Walmart. There's the super center down here at the bottom. Again, these dots can get inaccurate, especially like even in that location, they can be off some, but he's near the Walmart.
And do you recall if there's anything significant about Mr. Chen's phone being back at the Walmart again?
There is, because Jasmine Pace's phone reappears at the Walmart.
So when you say reappears, what do you mean?
It's been dark for this whole time period, and now it shows back up.
And can you look at the screen, please?
Yes, ma'am.
What does that represent?
That's the estimated location of Jasmine Pace's cell phone by Verizon, and it's pretty much centered on Walmart. It's 6:41.
Is this location the last location for several days that you see Miss Pace's phone?
The location is, but not the time.
So, tell the jury what you mean.
I see it again here in a minute, but
Okay,
it's never seen anywhere else after.
okay. Is this what you were talking about?
Yes, ma'am. So
Oh, okay.
6:49.
You-
Same location.
A few minutes later, it's detected again near the Walmart.
Yes,
And then does it go dark?
it does.
One second, Judge. Based on Ms. Pace's cell phone records, the Verizon records, were you also able to corroborate that her phone went dark around this time?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell the jury what we're seeing in this photo?
So this is from Verizon. It's part of those records we've been seeing. And this tells you a date and time. These numbers, I think we'll go over those in a few minutes, but these are kind of like serial numbers that tell you what phone it is and what model. long on me. But basically, this is the cell sites. And right there, you notice there's just blanks. Well, there's incoming calls or texts, and they go nowhere because there's no tower connected because the phone's not on the network anymore. So the activity showing up is actually inbound. And the phone doesn't acknowledge it, so you get this blank, just a blank column.
And do you see that the next, under the green highlighting, the next activity appears to be 11/26/2022, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, it jumps up to the 26th.
Based on your review of the file, do you know why that would be?
I do, because her family reactivated, they got a new SIM card for that number and reactivated a phone. And so the new activity starts showing up.
After this, do you recall if Mr. Chen's phone went back to the area of Walgreens?
Of Walgreens, yeah, probably did.
Sir, do you know approximately how far it is from the Walmart to the Walgreens?
It was, I think it was a 12, 13 minutes.
Did you look it up on
I
Google for
did.
the jury?
It's on Google. It was
Can you refer to the
9
screen?
minutes. Yes, ma'am.
This is just from a simple Google Maps search.
It is, the addresses are right here.
Have you seen this video?
Yes, ma'am.
And what time would that be in the right-hand corner?
In local Chattanooga, that is 7 p.m.
Exhibit 21, Your Honor. Does this video of Mr. Chen at the Walgreens at 7 o'clock corroborate his cell phone records?
It does.
And at some point, a while later, do we see Mr. Chen back at Tremont?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall what time he arrived back at Tremont?
I don't, but it wasn't long after that.
In your review of the evidence, were you able to see this video?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that that person appears to be leaving a building?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be a screenshot, is that correct?
It is.
All right, and now we go back to phone records. Did Mr. Chen's phone indicate that he was leaving the Tremont apartments around this time?
It did.
Around the exact same time that he is seen leaving the Tremont apartment building, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, just a minute later.
And do you recall where he went?
It goes to 900 Mountain Creek.
And is there other evidence that you've reviewed that would corroborate his travel to 900 Mountain Creek Road?
There is the camera that's across the street from Tremont. And my Chevy house.
And the My Chevy app you
Yes, ma'am.
said? Exhibit 2, you can see that Exhibit 2 indicates a start time of 8:27 and an end time of 8:45, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Does this corroborate Mr. Chen's cell phone records?
It does.
And were you able to, using his cell phone records, actually map him in the direction of 900 Mountain Creek Road?
I was able to map that. Yes, ma'am.
And then you mentioned this video, this is Exhibit 129 from Arctic camera footage, 11:23. Why is this significant, sir?
Because you can see the Pace vehicle, and I can make out the hat and the hoodie that I saw in the ring camera in the hallway.
It's your opinion that the person in this car is the same person in the hallway at that apartment building?
Yes, ma'am.
This video jumps a little bit, but are we seeing the white Chevrolet pull out
Right here.
of Tremont Street?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and is this a screenshot
It is, that's when he's turning that corner, and the colors aren't showing up on this display very well, but you can make out the red in that hat and the gray hoodie.
Do Mr. Chen's cell phone records corroborate that he would be leaving Tremont Street at this time?
They do.
And did you Google map for the jury approximately how long it would take to get from Tremont Street to 900 Mountain Creek Road?
I did.
You can look at the screen for me. Approximately how long would that take?
It's a 12-minute trip.
Mr. Chen left the apartment around 8:30. Exhibit 24, have you seen this video before, Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, is this video taken from the Mountain Creek Road apartment buildings?
It is. Right here.
Does that appear to be a white SUV?
Yes, ma'am.
At this point in time, is Mr. Chen's cell phone location data showing that he is in or around 900 Mountain Creek Road?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And then have you also seen the next part of this video that shows what looks like or has been testified to a Prius pulling into this parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
What time does that Prius pull into the parking lot?
8:49.
Mr. Hamilton, I'm going to approach you with two documents. Can you look at those for me?
Okay.
Do you recognize those?
I do.
What are these documents?
Those are extracted from Mr. Chen's cell phone by Celebrate, and they're pieces of an app. Oh, it's a list app.
Okay,
It
so-
has some remnants of messaging that it's
So these were extracted in the cell phone download, correct?
correct from Mr. Chen's cell phone.
That's why you said Cellbrite, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and when you say from an app, what does that mean?
So I'm sure most of us are familiar with smartphones. You can install apps, and even if you want to install that app, most of them leave pieces around your phone where they store stuff. And in this particular case, there's pieces of an app for Lyft to get a car ride. And it left some telltale messages, and that's what the
Your Honor, I asked if we moved into evidence and citizens.
218.
Now, you just testified to Lyft. 218, Judge? I'll have you look at the screen.
yes, ma'am.
This would be the first page of Exhibit 218. Now, can you tell the jury while looking at this, can you describe for the jury what you mean by an app and how we know that it's from the Lyft app?
Okay. The reason we know it's in this database tells us where it's stored at. It's telling us it was using data on the network. But what's interesting is it's Zim writing. So I learned something in this case. That was a computer nerd, and he wanted to go see his girlfriend in college in California. He couldn't afford it, so he created an app to get people to pick him up and take him to see his girl. And his name was Zimmer. He started that in 2012, and so it was called Zimride for a year, and then they changed the name to Lyft. But that's a computer programmer, and that's where Zimride came from. So
Okay.
it's still called internally because I guess that was their early software. It's still called Zimride, but it's Lyft.
And what would the timestamp there be indicative of?
So UTC 5 minus 5 is Eastern West Chattanooga time, and that is at 2039, which is 8:39 for non-military folks.
And then the second page of 218 shows the same thing, except now we've got a different time on there. Is that correct?
Yes, this is actually application coming in, and it's at 2050, which would be 8:50 p.m. So we're 11 minutes later.
How do you know it's a notification coming in?
It says location feedback notification.
Okay, and where is Mr. Chen's cell phone at 8:50 p.m.?
It's in the parking lot of 900 Mountain Creek on the corner right beside the parking lot.
Does this map reflect that testimony?
Yes, so this is the whole parking lot, and it's showing him right there on the main street.
At this point, does Mr. Chen's phone appear to travel back to the Tremont Apartments?
It does.
How long of a trip again would that be, Mr. Hamilton?
It's 12.
It's on the screen.
12 minutes.
Are you able to tell us at what time both the gray Prius and Mr. Chen's cell phone arrived back at Tremont Street?
Yeah, it was about 12 minutes later. So
Is there video evidence that
There is,
corroborates
yeah.
this as well?
that same Arctic camera catches it.
Exhibit 129.
Yes, ma'am, at 9:02, and we left at 8:50, so 12 minutes. And there's the Prius.
And does this video corroborate Mr. Chen's cell phone records?
It does. His records coming around at the same time. And they're stopping and putting the hazards on and letting somebody out. You'll see them kind of run right up in here. And
Actually,
that's a zoom of it there.
Yeah, I think this is a video that zooms in on it. Does that person appear to have a hoodie on?
They did.
And at this point in time, are Mr. Chen's phone records showing that he is back at his apartment on Tremont Street?
They are.
All right. The next question I ask you is significant. Where was Mr. Chen's cell phone from this time on 11/23 until midday on 11/25?
It was here.
It was at his apartment
Yes.
the entire time.
Yes.
Didn't go anywhere.
No.
Would you agree that that's basically a day and a half?
It is. Yes, ma'am.
Now, you testified earlier that you testified to the jury what the difference between a SIM card and a cell phone is,
Yes.
correct? Are you aware in this case that Ms. Pace's SIM card was located at some point, and I apologize, this is the slide that shows Mr. Chen back at Tremont, is that correct?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, are you aware that this was found in Mr. Chen's possessions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and this is 167-2, State's Exhibit. Have you seen this photo before?
I have.
Have you also seen the forensic report that was extracted by the digital forensics unit
Yes,
from
ma'am.
this SIM card?
I have.
Now you're seeing Exhibit 201 next to Exhibit 167-2.
Correct.
The SIM card report shows that, well, what does the SIM card report show?
So on this slide, what I'm showing is, it's called ICCID, and you can read it there, Integrated Circuit Card Identifier. It's all these they're like serial numbers. That's what's printed on the outside. That's an ICCID. Electronically, this is extracted by Celebrite, so that nobody typed anything in there. That number matches that number, so that tells me this report is on the device that they physically took a picture of. There's only one of these in the world with that number, because your phone would get mixed up with somebody, so you can't have any duplicates. So that tells me this report's valid, and it matches what they found of the numbers.
Now, for your purposes, is there another significant number on this forensic report?
There is.
And what is that?
It'll be the, well, 2 of them actually. So,
This exhibit 201 still,
yeah,
Judge.
the MC is kind of an internal number on that card that tells them,
MC, and you're saying
Yeah, that's-
IMSI.
yeah, International Mobile Subscriber Identity. Nah, that's how you show up on their network. You're not the phone number, you're actually an MC, and then they translate. I know it's a little complicated, but another unique number that's only going to be in that card, and it matches this is from Verizon records. So now I'm looking at to see if the forensic download of the physical card matches the records that were sent by Verizon, and it does because the MC matches. So now we know the card is the right card, we know we did the right phone, and we know we got the right records. Now match. So, and there's another number that's kind of important.
That's right. It says subscriber MSISDN. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what does that stand for?
So that's the Mobile Station International Subscriber Directory number, which we all call my phone number. That's your phone number. So it's right down here, and it's, when they do the whole thing, it'll always have a 1 because the United States is area code 1. But that's her phone number. So that can change on that card. You can change phone numbers on the same SIM card. You can have SIM cards with more than one phone number, but in this case, that's her phone number and that's her number.
For your purposes, is the IMEI also significant?
It is.
All right, let's talk on the screen behind you. Let's talk. What's the IMEI?
So this number is basically engraved into your phone. It has nothing to do with the SIM card. Sometimes it's hidden, but it's on the SIM card holder. But that is the serial number of your hardware, your phone itself. The network gets broadcast to the network, and the reason they do that is that's another way to identify you're the right person. But mainly, if somebody steals your phone, you can report it stolen. They'll put this IMEI, which is your equipment identity, they'll put it on a list, and then we'll let that phone back on a network. So that's very important to identify the physical phone, no matter what SIM card it's in.
So to clear this up for the jury, because we've talked about the difference between the phone and the SIM card, are you aware that vehicles have a VIN number
Yes, ma'am.
that identifies the vehicle itself?
Yes.
Is the IMEI basically like the physical phone's VIN number?
It is. That's a good way to put it.
Look-
You can't change it. It's electronically embedded into it. And there's only one in the world, so that identifies the actual phone. No matter if it's SIM card, no SIM card, that way you'll know whose phone it is.
At some point on 11/25, is there something that happens that involves Jasmine Pace's phone based on your explanation of the IMEI?
Yes, ma'am.
And what would that be?
Jason Chen's SIM card gets put in Jasmine Pace's cell phone, and he starts using her nice bigger iPhone 13.
And can you please refer to the screen and explain to the jury how, based on these telephone records, you know that?
So this is his records from T-Mobile, and here's that IMEI we were talking about, and we have them both from the forensic download and from his records and her records, so I got them 3 different ways. And this IMEI, actually encoded into that IMEI is the make and model, so they can determine that from when it comes in. But that number is unique in the world, and right here, you'll see that ends in 2297, and it's an iPhone XR. Right here, it turns into 2742. Now you'll see on the other records, there's actually a number after the 2. That's a check sum. So they're 14 digits. Some of them have an extra digit to check them, but you just kind of ignore it. But his phone changes into an iPhone 13 Pro Max, which is what hers is. And that happens on 11/25 at 2:07 in the afternoon.
So is it your opinion that Mr. Chen on November 25th, 2020, inserted his own SIM card into Jasmine Pace's phone?
Somebody did, yes, ma'am.
Somebody did.
I'm not sure who did it, but they had to physically remove it from the one phone because it was working. And less than a minute later, it shows up in another device. So it doesn't take long to plug them in. I'm sure most of us have done that. But yeah, somebody physically moved it from one piece of hardware to the other.
Were you able to see at this time, were you able to view at this time Mr. Chen's last location record?
Yes, ma'am.
And is the slide on the big screen
Yeah, it's,
reflective of that?
it is. That's going to be, it's not, the dots are again drifting a little bit, but he's down North Chen.
Close to Tremont Street?
Yes. Here's, it's hard to see, but that's Tremont, and the dots are, they're floating around in here. And you got, it's 207 and 20, and then 207 42. And the very last blip from that thing was at 51 seconds, 207 51.
So we're able to see here his last record from his iPhone, and then are you
Yes.
able to see when his SIM card is inserted into Jasmine Pace's phone?
Yes, ma'am, because that IMEI number changes. And that's,
I'm sorry, there you
oh
go.
yeah, see his IMEI is in 97, that's his iPhone that's been for the entire time. And right in this 1 minute, it changes to what hers has been for this entire time up until this.
Is it about to change on the next slide?
It is. And now we're 54 seconds later, and there is her hardware serial number shows up in his T-Mobile records. The phone doesn't care whose phone it is. When you put that SIM card in, it becomes your phone and your phone number. The apps don't change and that kind of stuff, but the phone, the calls, the texts, and all will go to the number in the SIM card. So he came back up on the network under a minute with his same SIM card per phone.
And do you know how long his SIM card stayed in her phone?
Actually, I think it stayed in there until 11/28.
The day of November 28,
Yes, ma'am.
2022?
Yes.
And at some point, using Mr. Chen's location records, because let's clarify for the jury. He's got Jasmine's phone, but his SIM card. So does that mean that we are still able to track him based on his phone records?
Yes. Yep, same records. The only thing that changes is the column that says IMEI and the column that says make him on. Everything else is the same.
At some point on, I'm sorry, were you going to say anything? Okay. On November 25th, 2022, at some point does Mr. Chen travel from Hamilton County to Nolensville, Tennessee?
He does.
And is that reflected on the screen?
It is.
Can you talk to the jury about this, please?
This is just zoomed out, and then I let it not erase the dots. So for the entire trip, so you can just see, you know, if you watched it as a movie, you just see it slowly progressing, you know, the highway. But that is following the interstate back up to Nashville.
And approximately how long does it take him to get from Chattanooga to Nolensville?
I think that one was about a little over 2 hours.
And did you also look up that trip on Google Maps?
I did.
Is it on the screen right now?
Yes, ma'am. That's it.
Would it take approximately 2 hours to get from Chattanooga to Nolensville?
Correct.
Can you see, are you aware of, were you made aware of Mr. Chen's parents' address?
I was. That's actually in the cell records.
Okay. And were you able to identify at what time Mr. Chen arrived at his parents' home on November 25th?
Yes, ma'am. It was 4:50.
Can you explain to the jury what we see here?
So this pin is showing their location in the Ashburn Fort. And this is saying he's using, at 4:51 he's using this side of the tower. At 4:52 he starts using this side. So I think he's transitioned beyond this line right here, the one that's kind of straight down. And then that dot right there is in the 4:50 time frame. So right around 4:50 he's pretty close to Ashburn.
How long does he stay based on the phone records in Nolensville?
He stays until
the 27th.
Where does he go on November 27th?
He comes back to the North Shore in Chattanooga. So this is his travel southbound, coming back this way.
Okay, and then this next slide, what does this show?
That shows the entire travel path. What I found, he didn't deviate really, he just came straight in.
What area of town does his phone travel back to in Chattanooga?
He's just a little bit west of Tremont Street, kind of where we call it Renaissance Park, but he never does actually show up right all the way to Tremont, but he's within a few blocks of it.
That would indicate to the jury that you are able to see with quite a bit of accuracy where a phone is located. Is that correct?
It is.
Because here you know that he doesn't make it all the way back to Tremont, but you know that he's nearby. Is that right?
Correct.
And when we say that you know he is nearby, we mean you know where his phone is.
Phone is correct. not
And his phone was just a few blocks from Tremont Street
Yes.
at, let's see, I've got this, 637
Yes.
on
So
1127. Yeah, so go ahead and map it out for the jury.
here's 110 Tremont. That camera we've been watching is right here on this intersection. And that's just a couple blocks to walk. That phone stays over in this area. And we've got a long history of seeing what it looks like when it's at Tremont. It kind of bounces around these arcs, so it never makes it that far. It stays a little bit, block or two away.
Are you aware, Mr. Hamilton, of what time on November 27, 2022, the Chattanooga Police Department was able to secure Mr. Chen's apartment?
I think it was 10:30.
Will you refer to your notes and see if you can find it in there?
I think that's still, that slide's not in this. I don't recall.
Do you
I don't think I
recall?
have that slide. It was late that evening. I remember it was 10, 11 o'clock.
Let me ask you this. Do you recall that it was after this?
Yes, it was.
Do you recall what time Mr. Chen's phone leaves, well, Ms. Pacey's phone with Mr. Chen's SIM card in it leaves the area of Tremont and North Chattanooga?
Yes, it was around 9:30.
And the jury, if you'll remember, is not from Hamilton County. Can you describe for them where Mr. Chen travels to?
So Hickson will be north up here. It's actually a little bit further than where the Pace family lives. It's up towards that way, but it's just north of there. It's a suburb of, kind of blends in with the North Shore, and then it becomes Hickson.
What do we see on this map?
So this is him leaving that area around a little bit west of Fraser Avenue and starting to travel. I'm starting to see movement.
Are you able to see when his phone arrives in Hickson?
I do. It's, like it should be about 10 minutes later he's in that area.
You would describe Hickson as not too far from the North Shore?
No, it's a short drive, depending on traffic.
Do you recall how long Mr. Chen's phone stays in the Hickson area?
Yeah, he stayed for till 10:15.
Can you describe for the jury what we see in this photo?
So he's left Hickson to be up here. He's leaving out and traveling back down. There's some gaps here and there, but he's traveling back to I-24. So here's downtown and Tremont. And there's the interstate. So he's back on I-24 heading back north.
And then where does Mr. Chen's phone take him?
Eventually he gets back to Nolensville to Ashburn Court at his parents' house.
Is that where he goes after he leaves Hickson?
It is. He makes I think he makes a few stops on the way, but he gets there.
Does this map map indicate his travel back to Nolensville?
It does.
Why would there be that gap in this one?
That basically be the phones not communicating with the network for the myriad of reasons we discussed earlier. There's a lot, but it's not on, or it's just, it was battery died and had to recharge it.
And then where does Mr. Chen's phone stay for the remainder of the records?
It stays at Nolensville. It's kind of hard to see, but there's the address, the actual house, and the almost centered in the estimated location. But yeah, it stays there up through what I saw.
Okay. So, is it your opinion that Mr. Chen's cellular location data matches the other discovery that you have seen in this case?
It is.
The other evidence that you have seen in this
Yes.
case? It is your opinion that Mr. Chen left his apartment on the night of November 23rd, 2022 and drove to Sup Creek Road?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're done with location data. You testified that you inspected both Mr. Chen's forensic download, correct?
Correct.
How much time did you spend inspecting Mr. Chen's forensic download?
Not a lot, because I wasn't allowed to until very recently. I probably have 10, 20, I'd say 10 or 12 hours.
Okay. And how long were you able, what amount of time did you spend with his cellular records from T-Mobile?
Probably 50, 60 hours, and a lot of that was actually converting those oddball videos into standard format so that they play in court and corroborating what a report said. Because I actually went through all the police reports and all, and kind of built the case myself, not knowing anything about it. I like to do that first and then talk to the detectives and find out what their story is. So I spent a lot of time reading and trying to wrap my head around what happened just from all the notes that are in the discovery file.
And you did that in this case?
I did.
You want to pull it up? Keep accessing. Oh, Mr. Hamilton, I'm going to rely on your eyeglasses for this one.
Yeah.
And then we'll zoom in for the jury, but I'm going to ask you to look at this best you can.
Turn the lights on.
Can we turn the lights on? That's actually a good idea.
That helps. Okay. Yeah, I can read that now.
Do you recognize this?
I do.
What is this?
This is a page from the cell providers. This is called SMS, which stands for short message, but this is content of text messages. And sometimes we get those, and in this case, that's what we have is different text messages.
And can you tell whose phone those records are from?
I can, it's from Jasmine Pace's phone because it has the ISBN, which tells me the phone number. It has all those numbers we talked about. So I know this is Jasmine's phone, and this is the content of some of her text messages. So it has a date and time with the message and who it's from, who it's to.
Do you recall reviewing these records?
I do.
Your Honor, as these records be entered as the state's next exhibit, granted the Verizon records are already already in evidence, but I would like for this specific record to be in evidence.
219.
Yes, sir. You can keep it up there.
Okay.
All right, let's see, I tried to do it on this time where I can, zoom in so we can help here.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
Oh, wow, I did it. Okay, all right, so are these the records that you were looking at?
Yes, ma'am.
And over to the beginning at the left, you'll see message arrival and final disposition. What does that mean?
That tells you what time it came in, and then if the phone was not on the network, like you turned it off, and then you turn it back on, those messages sit in a hopper, and as soon as you turn your phone on, they pop in there. So those times aren't always the same. If they are, it means your phone got the message immediately.
Objection, may I refer? Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Hamilton, one thing, before the bench conference, my colleague reminded me, this actually says T-Mobile SMS content, but is this Verizon SMS content?
It is.
That would be inaccurate. It's actually
It is.
Verizon, correct? That was
That's
my-
correct.
That was my mistake. Okay, let's go back here. Sorry, Judge, it's not like-
Take your time. Got a computer expert on stand.
That's Apple, I don't do that. Not a Mac.
Your Honor, can you switch the prosecution on top? Okay, looky there. All right, so here's a larger version of the image. Would you agree?
Yes.
And now, let's see, I'll get a pointer. Okay. Over here, would you agree that this is Jasmine's phone number?
Yes, ma'am, that's Jasmine Pace's phone.
Does this indicate that these are Jasmine Pace's phone records?
It does.
Okay, and I'm going to draw your attention over here. And Paul, if you could scroll down just a little bit. All right, so we're in the time frame of the 4 o'clock hour. Would that be AM?
So yes, that's actually the correct time, because, and the reason you have to know where the switch is, and that's, the Duluth switch, which I'm familiar, that's in Atlanta, so those times are actually accurate. To Chattanooga time, because we're both in the same time zone.
Are these records indicating activity on Miss Pace's phone?
They are, their text messages coming in.
Okay, and can you scroll over, General Moyle? Okay, so in the 4 o'clock hour, what are we seeing on the right?
So this is the content of the text message. These crazy ones, a lot of them are the emojis, and they have symbols to represent them, which I don't even try to decode that. But these are just plain English that'll show up on the phone. And I'm seeing Truist, which I know to be a bank, codes to get into the account. And there's Credit One Bank, there's Cash Out, there's Truist again. So these are mostly banking apps, and somebody's requesting the passcode to get into it. And it's sending it because it's coming from the app on the phone that has the app on it.
Your Honor, I'd ask you to go back to the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
the Verizon record, let's go back to the T-Mobile records. Are you able to, using the records, are you able to actually search for different types of notifications?
You can, yes, you can search for, in the celebrate report mostly, but you can also do it in the records. You can search for terms. So you can put a word or a number or whatever, and it'll go find it all through whatever the database report, it'll find it.
So if you were to enter the word banana, it might show you where banana is used in those records?
Yes.
Okay. And you said this is in Celebrate, is that correct? No, I'm sorry, what you just described, the searching.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. The other one was actually from the record.
I'm going to hand you this document. Do you recognize that?
I did.
Did you, using Celebrate, search for a word?
Did
What was that word?
tender. I don't know if you were putting it up there, but yes, the word T-I-N-D-E-R, tender.
Would that confidently pull up all of the Tinder activity on someone's phone?
Yeah, it will, even if there's, the app's no longer there, there's still a piece of crumbs laying around, and it'll find them, so yeah, I think what it did.
Your Honor, I asked if this is State's Exhibit 220.
So,
If you can please turn to the screen. This is Exhibit 220. Are these the records you were just looking at?
They are.
All right, we're going to zoom in. On these records, 1121, can you see that there was activity on Mr. Chen's Twitter?
Yes, there's some cookies, 11:20, and then here's 11:21.
What do cookies mean?
They're like they sound almost, they're like a breadcrumb. It's a piece of information stored on your device that lets them know what time of day. And we get it on web pages. They're part of the revenue stream from ads and things.
Would that indicate activity?
It would.
Okay.
At least the app is running.
And then is there any activity from 11/22/2022?
From me.
And then what is the first activity from Tinder on 11/23/2022?
This is local time, Chattanooga, 9:51 in the morning on the 23rd.
And then there's more activity at 9:52, is that correct?
Yes.
And 9:52 and 9:52, and then we jump to 12:55.
Correct.
And what would Grace indicate?
That would be a name of some contact name that's stored.
And do you see here at 9:52, does Jason send a message on Tinder?
He does. It says like, so I guess we're dating now.
And then does Victoria say something at
Yeah.
21:50?
He does. So they can see who he contacted in the morning, and then this would be at 9:50 at night. So that same evening on the 23rd at 9:50 p.m. Haha, really? Question mark, why is that? Well, it's smiley face.
I did. Okay. Apparently, it's, at one point, Mr. Hamilton, I mentioned Twitter. For clarity, this is Tinder, correct?
Correct. It's Tinder, T-I-N-D-E-R.
And now we're going to go to a zoomed-in shot of the bottom of the original page, the Tinder page.
Yes.
This is now 11:28,
Correct.
and is Mr. Chen reaching out to Sarah and asking her what's going on?
He is.
these notifications, the notifications from 11/23/2022, were those after Miss Pace's phone had sent a location to another phone?
Yes.
What about the Truist messages and the bank messages? Were those after the PIN
They were.
was sent to someone?
Because her pin was at 2 a.m. and these are 9 a.m., 10, all the way down through, we get down to 9, almost 10 o'clock at night here.
All right. Lastly, I'm going to ask that you look through these records. I'm sorry, I need to show them to defense counsel. I apologize. Can you review those records for me? Do you recognize those?
Yes, ma'am, they're from Celebrate, Jason Chen's cell phone, and their messages.
Would that have been discovered through the forensic download of Mr. Chen's phone?
It is.
And did you review those messages?
I did.
Are those text messages?
Yes, they're called iMessages, so there's a distinction.
Sure.
Text messages are sent to a different packet of data, but iMessages are just internet. So you can't read when they're in the air, but, yeah, so this is specific to an Apple phone. And it's called iMessage.
Your Honor, I'd ask that these records be submitted as collective exhibit 221. I'll staple them.
Yes.
Okay, I believe that's exhibit 220,
221.
221, I apologize.
Are those stapled?
There we go, Judge. Do these records indicate text messages on Mr. Chen's phone from a certain time period?
They do.
And what's that time period?
That was starting at 11/23.
Do they go briefly into 11/25? Okay. So we're going to start here. These are from 11/24. Can you tell the jury who these messages would be from?
Yeah, if there's a contact stored in the phone, it'll put the name with it. If there's no contact, it'll just have the phone number. So when you see both the number and a name, that's somebody that was stored in the phone. So like in this case, it says Nina, I guess is the pronunciation. There's some other numbers that have no name by them, so it's somebody that's not stored in his contacts. So
So it keeps a record of the number, but you gotta put the name in yourself.
Now, so these are coming to Jason's phone, is that correct?
Yes, so over here, it'll tell you red.
That means that they're to him and not from him, is that correct?
Yes.
And does this mean anything to you? We're gonna place search, and also, well, first of all, can you tell the jury why we see multiple of the same text message?
Those are group messages where you pick 4 or 5, however many people, and send one message to all of them at once.
And it's gonna show up here multiple times.
It does.
So that's not actually 5 messages of you guys running more Warzone, it's just one message sent to 5 people.
Yeah, and if you notice the times, there's blocks of 5 at the same time, so,
Okay.
and the 5 numbers, so,
And for group messages, we would continue to see that.
yes.
Does this mean anything to you, you guys running more Warzone, we're gonna play search?
I think, to me, that looks like a game player, and they're chatting with the phones between the group.
Would you agree we're going in reverse chronology with these?
Yes.
So at the bottom here, we have 11/23/2022, and what would that time be?
That would be 11:56 p.m. on the 23rd, and then the dates are getting higher up top.
Just before midnight?
Yes, that's what, 3.5 minutes, 2 minutes, 40-some seconds before midnight on the 23rd.
And the next page, again, we're going reverse chronology. Now, what does that green mean?
That is, I believe, that is for the Android.
But I'm saying now, who's
Oh.
sending these messages?
Oh, Jason is,
And do we know that based on this?
Yes.
But also the position of the text?
yes, it says sent instead of red.
And these are on 11/23/2022?
Yes, and I believe, actually, that phone was, it was on Central Time, so that actually be off an hour.
And off an hour in which way?
It's earlier, so it's actually
106?
106, yes.
106
Chattanooga, if we go with Chattanooga time,
Okay, on the 24th, but
yes.
late night on the 23rd, early morning hours of the 24th.
Yes.
Okay.
This is all Nashville time in this report.
And right here, when you get down to 22, that is the late night on the 23rd, is that correct?
Yes, that actually been 10, so that'd be 11:30 at night.
Okay, and is your opinion still that they're speaking of gaming, is what you said, which would be video games?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it is.
Is 11:23 at approximately midnight, is that after 11:23 at 2:15 in the morning?
No, that's prior to.
No, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry, on the 23rd, yes, it is.
11:23 at 2:15 a.m. is before this, is that correct?
Correct. That's 20 hours.
And from 6 p.m. on 11/23, when Mr. Chen left his apartment and went to Sub Creek Road, how much later is this?
That's, what, 5-6 hours?
And then they keep going for pages without Mr. Chen responding. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And are these more group messages to Mr. Chen?
They are, I look at the time column because that tells you real quick, there's 4 of them at the exact same second. So yes, there's some group messages.
Do these messages indicate maybe some video gaming going on?
That looks like the language. I'm not a gamer, but that's, would be common.
This is going down chronologically, so we're around 9:30 down here.
Yes, ma'am. 9:30 p.m. Chattanooga.
And is there anything, did you see anything else from Mr. Chen from the time, from 11/23/2022?
I don't recall seeing anything else.
You can see here where we get from 11/23 to 11/22.
Right.
be back when that clock says 4:10. Any specific text messages that you're wanting to get in, or any specific text messages the state suggests?
So we're looking to introduce the entirety of the text messages. And the most important thing that the motion states is that it's for non-hearsay purposes. We're trying to establish that Jason Chen had a relationship. This isn't just a one-night thing. And these text messages show the entire relationship between Jasmine and Jason. And so it shows when they were dating, how they would go out. There's not any particular text message that the defense intends to point to and actually even discuss with Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton? Okay.
And what's the state position?
Your Honor, the state has multiple positions. First of all, for the record, this came up between the parties on Monday. It was noted that we would object to these messages, and we just received this motion approximately 4.5 minutes ago. So, I've barely had time to review it, but I do know how the state feels about it because, number one, it's hearsay. It is, the only party opponent in this case would be Jason Chen versus the state of Tennessee. So they are hearsay. For the truth of the matter asserted, Mr. Weiss has admitted he's trying to assert the length and nature of the relationship between the defendant and the decedent and the amount of time the defendant and the decedent spent together. That's for the truth of the matter asserted. He cannot point to an actual hearsay exception, such as effect on the listener. There is no hearsay exception in here because they are hearsay. More importantly, the text messages are approximately 200 pages. They go back to 2021 when the two of them first spoke on Bumble. 2021. And then they pick back up in conversation in 2022, approximately April or May, Your Honor. A majority of the text messages cannot have any relevance to this case. Unless there was a text message, which there is not, in which she's threatening the defendant for some reason, none of them are relevant. So first of all, they're hearsay. Second of all, they're not relevant, even though the threshold is low. 2021 messages are not relevant to a homicide that occurred in 2022 in a trial that's in 2025. They are simply not relevant. They are hearsay. They're being used by the defendant. Those are his own statements. That is inadmissible hearsay. Next step, after the court makes a ruling, we believe that there are specific messages that pertain to potentially sexual relations that are inappropriate and further inadmissible. They're prejudicial, they're irrelevant, they're inappropriate, and they're not for the jury to see in a homicide case.
Let's take it backwards. I do know that the rape shield law prevents sexual related information about the victim, people other than the defendant. I think that same body case law makes it pretty clear that the relationship between the victim and the defendant is admissible. So I don't, unless there's a specific case you're referring to, I think generally that's the law as well.
Your Honor, Rule 412 also doesn't apply to a murder case, it only applies to sex offense cases.
No.
That's the very first part of 412.
A text message from early 2022 about sexual relations between the defendant and the victim are not relevant to a homicide trial in November of 2022.
Well, I'm a little at a loss without knowing the specifics of the text messages to make a determination whether the text messages whether any text message happens to be unfairly prejudicial. So that's one of the criteria that I'm going to have to look at.
Would you like to see the text messages?
I can. So, obviously, say there's 2,000 reasons.
There's 200 pages, Judge. I don't know how many messages there are.
240, but I mean, there's not that much information on each page. So yes, 240 pages, but it's.
So what I don't want, I'm generally leaning towards if there's a specific message that you can point out, Mr. Weiss, that represents what the type of message you want to get in, it might be easier for me to look at it, make sure that while it might meet the criteria you're talking about, it still may be unfairly prejudicial and not meet that threshold.
Your Honor, I've listed all these reasons in this motion, and this is not a written motion that I had to file or write up. This is something that I would have tried to introduce it, someone would have objected, and we would have been right here.
What we're talking about, please talk about the substance of your motion.
So the entirety of the vestiges are relevant for non-hearsay purposes, and I list up.
Well, let me start by saying this. Let me let you know the way I see things now. That might help guide your argument. Generally speaking, I do understand that if one party puts in part of a conversation or part of a relationship, the party can, for the rule of completeness, put in other aspects of the conversation, whether they're long or short. And so I do think that militates towards admission of some of these. I do think that, again, I'm a little at a loss to see which specific message you're talking about. Generally, the way I interpret the hearsay application is that whatever the body of the text message happens to be, it's not being taken that literally whatever is in the text message is true, but it could be indicative of, as you said, effect on the listener or just indicative of a relationship. If they're saying, let's go to this particular restaurant tonight, hearsay would, if the party was offering for the fact that they went to that restaurant that night, that would be for the truth matter asserted. If it's just showing that they're going out, they're going to dinner, they're engaged in some type of relationship, that would be a non-hearsay purpose. But again, without looking at the specific text messages, I can't say for sure. Again, what I don't want to happen is to let in a bunch of text messages, and they are truly unfairly prejudicial to one side or the probative value of what you're trying to establish is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice.
So, just to go over my motion, these messages will show the length and nature of the relationship between the defendant and the decedent, the amount of time the decedent and the defendant spent together, the progression and dynamics of their relationship, including the imbalance of the infection that I talked about during opening. And then, secondly, the prosecution already introduced these text messages into evidence. So, as the court noted, there is the rule of completeness.
I'm with you on the first part.
Okay.
I'm with you on the second part. I just need to know what specific text messages you're talking about to make sure it's not unfairly prejudicial.
I think you should, respectfully, I think it should go about the other way. I'm trying to introduce these, and I think they're all relevant for the purposes that I'm stating. If there are specific text messages that the state says that they find unfairly prejudicial, I think it's the state that should say, these are the messages that we want redacted or are not appropriate. And
Well,
that,
okay, sorry.
but that's a good segue to the text messages that are sexual in nature, I guess. But, I mean, it's not, well, I wouldn't say it reaches the point of vulgarity or obscenity. So what I would say is that would show proof that the defendant and the decedent had a sexual relationship. They were dating of some kind, and that needs to be shown. That the relationship between the defendant and the decedent is central to the defense's case. So we would like to have the entirety of the text messages submitted to show that, to show this relationship. Lastly, the state's opened the door. They've already had Mr. Hamilton go through the data extraction of how they obtain these messages the same way that we receive them. They've gone through the defendant's Tinder. They've gone through the defendant's iMessages. None of those messages were redacted, even though we talked about relevancy. And so all those came in. So I believe the state has opened the door to allowing these text messages to come in. If their argument is a relevancy, well, then they shouldn't have introduced the iMessages.
Or does either side want to argue anything that hasn't been argued yet?
The iMessages, when the state uses them, are statements from a party opponent, a well-recognized hearsay exception. Mr. Weiss cannot use Mr. Chen's statement in court because it's not a party opponent. So that's slightly different. I do not agree that we've opened the door. However, Your Honor, if we can agree to eliminate the irrelevant text messages, and there's not many of them, but irrelevant text messages regarding sexual activity, and I've only noted 4 or 5 of them, then we'll agree to the text messages coming in. I do not believe that the text messages about sexual activity are relevant to Mr. Weiss's case or the homicide Jasmine case.
Okay, so we're tailoring down the argument now. So please show me the sexual messages that we're talking about. Apparently that's what.
Your Honor, I have them noted. If Your Honor will hold on to those, I'll point them out for you page by page.
May I just mention that I don't intend to ask Mr. Hamilton, tell me about this sexual text message. I don't intend to do that with this one.
No, he intends to tell the jury in closing argument to go back and read all the messages. That they will be in evidence and we object to them. I will go through them with Mr. Hamilton.
All right, let's see the messages.
On page, these pages are strange, Judge, on page 3360. I'm not going to read it out loud.
It's okay, I'll look at it.
If you could refer to, you said 3360?
Mhm.
Get a small packet fixed as well. Oh, you got some. 3360. For the purposes, for the non-hearsay purposes of showing the relationship between the parties, we'll find that these text messages, again, not for the truth of the matter asserted, but for the non-hearsay purpose of establishing the depth of the relationship between the victim and the defendant in this case, where there is a heavy component of domestic-related violence, perhaps, that the danger of unfair prejudice does not substantially outweigh the probative value of the text messages be admitted. Be deemed admissible, and then if the parties want to parse them out, they still can, but at this point, the ones I've seen are deemed admissible. Yes, you need your stuff?
Yes, sir. If we could just have 2 more minutes, Your Honor, while we put this together.
The state has already introduced text messages between the victim and defendant, even though this is different. It's not the state's theory of getting it in with a party opponent. That's for hearsay. It can be taken for the truth of the matter asserted. These text messages are not in the same category, so they cannot be taken for the truth of the matter asserted.
thing that you and I share is that I do not do Apple products. So we're going to slow things down a lot in this case. You're an Android person, PC, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
mostly.
Going back to what the general had discussed with you about the cell phone towers, related to the towers that you're relying on, how precise are they for giving you specific locations?
As far as the location of the tower or the location it's estimated?
The location it's estimating.
It actually tells you in there in meters. It can be from 15 meters to 5,000. They're not that precise. They're nowhere near GPS. Sometimes they can be as good as GPS, but often not.
That was my next question. So this is general locations only. It's not as accurate as a GPS.
No, but it's not going to show you on the wrong side of town or the wrong,
State.
You still, yeah. No, you've got to be in the coverage and you got to be, the model's got to work out. So it'd be rare that you'd be off more than a block or so.
Do you know what the margin of error is for the ranges that are provided in these
I
tests?
do not. This is all provided by the provider, so it's different. They use different logarithms. You would have to get their engineers, but they actually tell you what it is because the size of those circles you saw on the maps, that is there. So it's saying I'm estimating they're in this 500-meter circle or this 15-meter circle. So those circles are drawn to scale by cell phone.
So when you get these records
Mhm.
from T-Mobile, for
Yes.
instance, the records that they send to you, does it actually have a disclaimer on there to use caution when relying on them?
Some of them do. I didn't look at these. Some of them do say that.
Typically, it's specifically about law enforcement investigations and prosecution, correct?
It is, and that's why it's really neat when we find a missing person or a body or things by those records. But yes, it does. Most of them do have a legal disclaimer of some sort to cover themselves.
Now, do you have any data or evidence that definitively shows that Jason Chen returned to his residence after November 24th?
After his, yes, there's cell records that show him in the North Chattanooga area, but I don't have anything that puts him in 110 Tremont Street.
Okay, so definitively the answer is no, correct?
No.
We went through days and specific times from the 22nd, the 23rd, and the 24th showing cell phone records, correct?
Yes.
Then showing Arctic camera, correct?
Correct.
Showing surveillance video of stores, correct?
Yes.
But that doesn't exist after November 24th for Mr. Chen.
No.
Everything is
Well, the
approximations.
cell records still exist, but not the Arctic and the
Nothing
stores.
else
I
that's
didn't
supported.
see anything in the case file after the last videos, other than the cell records go beyond the 24th.
Okay.
And the phone download obviously has some data.
Right. But other than the cell phone location, which is approximations, there's nothing that you have that substantiates he's in 110 Tremont.
Correct. I can put him on the North Shore within a block or two of it. I would be comfortable with that, but not in the residence.
So I'm rephrasing this a little differently. It's going to sound repetitive, but you're not sitting here today saying definitively that he was in his apartment after November 24th, are you?
No, I'm saying he was in the area.
Now, there was Arctic videos that were available. Did you watch any Arctic videos that were from November 24th on to see if Mr. Chen was in the area of Tremont Tavern?
I found no Arctic videos after the 24th.
Let me back up. I just spoke of a restaurant, Tremont Tavern. I did not mean that. Tremont Apartments.
Oh.
You watched no Arctic cameras that showed him near the Tremont Apartments, correct?
Say, let's start over.
Okay. November 24th
Yes.
forward. Did you watch any Arctic cameras to see if he's in the location of the Tremont Apartments from November 24th forward?
I saw no video available in the case file for the 24th forward. So no, the answer is no, I did not look at anything beyond that.
Any ring camera footage that you were provided that showed him entering or exiting the apartment November
No.
24th forward?
I found none.
Now, Celebrate is something that's been discussed here
Yes.
a lot, not just through you. What is that?
It's a forensic tool that's made, it's out of Israel. And as I discussed earlier, it's actually originally made for transferring cell phone data from one phone to another. But it's
Like
a
at Verizon,
forensic.
you use that analogy, correct?
Yes, they actually had the same tool I had for forensics, it's just had different software in it, but it's software and hardware that's designed and engineered to extract information from phones and then put it in a readable format. There's many vendors do that, that's just,
Is it
one of
something that's pretty accepted in the forensic community?
it's 100% accepted, yes, ma'am.
How long have you used it?
Since they invented it.
Which was when?
I don't remember the year, because I started doing this stuff in 2002 and it wasn't available. We started out with suitcases full of cables because they made a different cable for every phone. I literally had suitcases of cables. So I've been doing this since it started.
Is there a specific feature that makes Cellbrite more reliable when extracting text messages than other programs?
I liked them. They've been at it longer than a lot of people, and they have a really good product. And it takes a lot of engineering behind it. They have to reverse engineer each cell phone model. So whatever you're carrying right now may not be in the list yet if it's something brand new. They have to buy it, spend months of reverse engineering everything in that phone. So they spend probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Androids last forever. Mine's pretty old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying? They have, every phone's different, so they have to build a tool for that phone. And the big players in that game have to have a lot of money. It's a very expensive product.
Now, when in this case, who all's phone has had an extraction done on it?
The
to
only
your
one I
knowledge?
looked at was Jason Chen's, and I asked them, and they didn't find the phone that belonged to Desmond Pace.
Like, just a SIM card is
But
your
I'm not-
understanding?
Yeah, I'm looking at it from the outside, kind of like you. I was brought in looking at the evidence that's in the folders.
Okay.
So
So
that's
Jared-
all I know about is Jason's.
And I know that the general had asked questions earlier, and she was talking to you about a SIM card
Yes.
and then a phone.
Yes.
The phone is actually what Cellbrite is plugged into, correct? Or
No, SIM card.
the
was.
SIM card is?
You can do the SIM card by itself, or the phone with the SIM in it, or the phone by itself. You
Okay.
can do all three.
So we know that we have a SIM card that we believe is Jasmine's, correct?
I can guarantee it's hers.
Okay.
That's what all those numbers show. There's not another one in the world with those numbers on it.
But you've not reviewed any kind of extraction from her SIM card, correct?
That's what was on the screen, ma'am. Yes, I did. That's a Cellbrite extraction of her SIM card found in Nolensville. Those screenshots you saw compared Verizon with Cellbrite. So that is,
So
yes,
maybe
I
I
have
just
reviewed it.
misunderstood what you said. I asked, had you seen any extractions other than Jason Chen's, and you said just Jason Chen. Was
You
that?
said phones, though, man. That's not a
Okay.
phone. It's a SIM card.
So now I'm with you. So SIM card for Jasmine, phone
Yes.
for Jason.
Correct.
Okay. So those are the only two extractions you're aware
Yes,
of
ma'am.
that you've reviewed.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, is there a specific procedure in place that actually protects the integrity of these extractions when they're done?
Yes, they actually have hash codes built into them. So if you alter one period in them, it will change the hash code, and you'll know. You can put a speck in a picture, and it will change the whole hash code. So yes, they're internally protected by what's known as hash codes. When they're exported, they're in a zip file, and that's hashed, and then that, if you change, like I said, any,
Now, when you say hashed, what do you mean?
it's getting technical, but basically it looks at all the data in there and it generates through an algorithm, it generates a number. And that number, if it is anything changed, that number will change.
How would I know if that hash is there?
Hire an expert in cell phone forensics, I'd say would be the best way. I don't know if you understand, you told me you weren't a big techie, but,
You know I'm not a big techie.
so yeah, I'd say you probably need to get at least, a lot of computer people know about hash codes.
Okay.
But that's a real big forensic thing because it basically protects, if anything gets corrupted,
You're an expert.
alter, yes, ma'am.
Did you see anything with the hash codes?
No, I didn't. It's a zip file. They're unalterable in their cell phone.
Okay.
If you alter a zip file, it won't extract. So I'm pretty comfortable that nobody's messed with it. I don't think anybody planted evidence or changed it or altered it. It would be almost impossible to do.
Okay. You just had mentioned the hash codes after I was talking about the integrity, so I didn't know if that was something you had
That's just
observed.
one way you can check them, but yeah, they're pretty secure. They've been doing this for a long time.
Now, were you present for the actual extraction of the phone, or did you just review it?
No, ma'am, I just got into it a few weeks ago because we were told not to look at it.
Okay. What is your understanding of what's included in the extraction? We'll start first with Jason's phone.
What do you mean, what's included?
What all was extracted from his phone?
I'd say everything so I could get, but I couldn't answer that from memory. It's dozens and hundreds of items.
Now, you've talked some on your testimony about some of the things that you've reviewed personally. So, did you see anything about iMessages? Did you see iMessages in his extraction?
They are in the PDF version of one I saw, but I didn't really dig into those.
Any other message forms that you saw?
There's SMS. There's like 2 or 3 categories of messages, and they depend on. I was talking about there's iMessages that are different than text messages. There's a whole category for messages.
And when you just said SMS messages, are those text messages?
Those are text messages.
And then iMessages are specific to iPhones?
Yes. We call them text messages, but that's a whole different animal.
Do you know, based on the SIM card that you received of Jasmine's, what the operating system was she was using on her phone?
I didn't receive her card. I just received a report about her
Okay.
card. In the report, it tells you about the card, and then I showed you the path to match that to her records. And in the records, that number up there on that screen tells you what make and model and manufacturer, and then a unique portion to the end. And then they nicely convert it for you, and right there in the thing it says iPhone 13 Max. So it's in the Verizon records, it's in the T-Mobile records, and that tells you what make and model. It said his was an XR, and it said hers. His, there's a lot more because Cellbrite extracted more information from his phone, but in both provider records, it tells you the make and model of the phone and that electronic serial number, and it's in both records. His obviously
So-
doesn't show up in hers, but hers shows up in his.
I guess my question is, where it says the 13 Pro, I know from what little I know about Apple, there's usually like an operating systems and it'll say 17 or...
No, so we're getting this from that, remember that IMEI?
Mhm.
That's the electronic serial number. That's all that makes it to Verizon.
Okay.
Verizon knows from that number, the first few blocks of it tell it what make and model. It doesn't tell it what OS. We get the OS, if you physically have the phone and download it with Celebrate, you'll get more than you ever wanted to read, but not from Verizon. So we don't have her phone. I didn't see it anywhere in there. We had her SIM card, which doesn't tell you anything about what's in the phone. That's separate. And Verizon knows she's using an iPhone 13 Pro, and what its serial number is. That eventually shows up over in Jason's records. But no, it wouldn't tell you what iOS version.
Okay. Is it called iOS, not iOS?
That's
That's how little I know about this.
I'm country boy, but
Okay.
I call it iOS. But yeah, the only way you're probably going to get that is either physically see it on the phone, or you're going to have to plug into it and extract the phone.
Are you familiar enough with Apple's to know if the 13 Pro Max would have been under a certain iOS or iOS?
I have no idea.
Now, there's been specific messages that you've looked at. Did you look at messages outside of iMessages between Jasmine and Jason?
I looked at all the activity in that phone in and around the 23rd, 24th, 22nd, that time period.
And some of the messages you've testified to or with group messages with people?
So that product actually will give you everything in the phone in chronological order, so you can actually just look at everything at once. Does that make sense?
It does. So based on the training that you have, the experience you have, and then the functionality of Celebrite, would you feel comfortable testifying that the extracted messages that you reviewed are actually authentic and that they accurately represent the data that was contained within the phone?
100%.
how do you look at these?
Avoid.
I'll ask a full question.
All right.
And Ms. Pierce, I brought the exhibit sticker back over here, but this will be 122. 122 will be the exhibit. 221. 222. Thank you. Do you recognize those documents, Mr. Hamilton?
Yeah, they look like celebrate. I don't see like the header page to it. That looks like messages in a format where you can see them.
Okay, and
Kinda like
without
read on
telling the
screen.
jury what the messages say, are you able to identify who the sender and receivers are of those text messages that are in front of you?
Yes.
Is it your understanding of what you're reviewing, and I can give you plenty more time, but that those are text messages between Jasmine Pace and Jason Chen?
Spot check on every 100 pages. It appears, yes, ma'am, that appears to be what I'm seeing there is the messages between Jasmine and Jason Chen.
Your Honor, I would like to have this Exhibit 222 moved into evidence as the true and accurate representation of the iMessages between Jason Chen and Jasmine Pace.
Okay, so admitted. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an additional instructions that come with this particular exhibit. These are text messages between the victim, Jasmine Pace, and the defendant that came from the defendant's phone. Unlike the text messages you heard earlier about that the state introduced, where you can use those for the truth of the matter asserted if you wish. These are being introduced not for the truth of the matter asserted, for a broader purpose, and that's just to show the link and the nature of the relationship between the defendant and the victim in this case, the amount of time that the defendant and the victim spent together, and the progression and dynamics of the relationship over time. So again, the distinction, like for example, the text message you saw earlier from that was introduced by the state about the defendant playing video games, you can, if you wish, determine that the defendant was playing video games about to get on. The text messages in this exhibit, the specific exhibit 222, cannot be used for that purpose, but only for the non-hearsay purpose, not for the truth of the matter asserted, but for the relationship issues that I mentioned earlier. Okay? You may continue.
Changing gears slightly, but going back to iPhones, there was some evidence that the state had brought up with you about notifications that were coming through almost simultaneously, it appeared. Truist Bank account, Capital Bank. Are you aware of what happens when iPhones are reset?
Reset as in restored?
Factory resets, like you had mentioned in your earlier direct?
Yes, if you reset them, they go back to the way they were with the day you got them from the store, so you've got to go put a SIM card in, you got to start over. It may have the SIM card already in it, but it'll go back to the factory default.
Okay. Now with iPhones, they have Apple IDs, correct?
We do.
So if you were resetting a phone and you put in your Apple ID, would that then prompt new messages to come out to change your password or authenticate your logins, or do you know?
I don't use Apple, but there actually was some Apple IDs in that list. And yes, so I'd say there's bank messages, there's the dinner message, there's some, in that same string there is Apple ID messages. If you have the access to the phone and know the password of the phone, especially if you've been dating a long time, you would probably know your girlfriend's phone, and you could get in there and get all those messages.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
You
about
did.
the
You did
light on the
answer.
phone?
Yes. I was making sure, because I know very little about iPhones, but there's nothing that I haven't discussed with you specifically about that. not to rehash things repetitively here, but the only extractions you are aware of are related to Jasmine Pace and Jason Chen, correct?
Jasmine's SIM card and Jason's cell phone. Yes, and that's it. That's all I saw.
Are you aware if there was any extraction done on Jasmine's mother, Katrina Pace's phone?
I saw some screenshots that ended up, I know in my report, I believe those are her phone, but no. I saw no physical or no Celebrite or any other product. All I saw was the pictures of those pin drops.
So about the pin drops, short of you having an extraction, is there any way for you to actually authenticate what that is? To show that the text message was received. Did you see that in Jasmine's extraction?
There isn't an extraction for Jasmine. Have you seen her? I haven't seen her phone. If we know where it is, it'd be good to do that.
Well, her SIM card.
SIM card doesn't have anything in it but your phone number and some serial numbers.
Okay, so you aren't aware of anything that actually authenticates that pin drop screenshot that you received?
No, but I doubt it would be really tough to fabricate a latitude, a longitude, a date, a time, and a screen, an LCD screen on a phone. That would be tough.
What if the individual themselves had been at Tremont Tavern and had the actual... Did I say tavern again? Okay.
It's a good restaurant.
It is a great restaurant. Thank you. And it's just around the street, correct?
It is. It's not far.
So at the Tremont apartment, if individuals had been at Tremont Apartments, could they potentially have access to the latitude and longitude of that facility?
Yeah, but there's actually a time on that too, and then there's metadata in that picture that tells me when it was taken. So you would have to fabricate a lot of cool stuff. I could probably use some help in my office if somebody could do that.
Is it possible, though, that,
Everything's possible.
but you have not seen an extraction, so there's no way that you can say with certainty that that is an authentic pin drop, correct?
My expert opinion is it's real. It's a good picture, but anything's possible. Somebody could have fabricated that. That's true.
All right, Mr. Hamilton, that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Direct.
Mr. Hamilton, Ms. Morrison asked you about a factory reset as it related to those bank notifications, and you mentioned an Apple ID notification.
Yes.
In your professional opinion, would those messages have been the result of a factory reset?
No, the reason I know it's factory reset because in the forensic download from Jason Chen's phone, it says it was factory reset. Basically, it was restored from the iCloud, which erases everything in it to where it's unrecoverable. Then you can go pick one of the dates, and I've never done it personally, but you can pick a date and time that you want to restore it to, and it puts all your phone back the way it was, and that's the phone that was downloaded. It was actually a restored phone, so it had been wiped clean, restored back to some date that I don't know, but it tells me that in the forensic tool, but that wouldn't affect the messages coming in. That's just your phone number. And even though the SIM card wasn't active at the time, those messages are still coming across the network.
Understood. And to be clear, because you were asked about this multiple times, you weren't able to do a download on Jasmine Pace's phone because Jasmine Pace's phone was never found.
Yes, ma'am, and I kind of got out of business, so, but the city had those and ran them, and yeah, you got to have the physical device to download it, and you're not going to get nearly the information from the provider. You get some clues that we saw here, but the big pile of stuff's usually in a phone that hasn't been back and then wiped out, restored. That took a lot out. I can't say what I was in it, but I can tell you that looking at it, there's not nearly what I would expect to see. The restoration doesn't bring everything back.
Okay,
Brings back the important parts.
okay. Based on your knowledge and testimony, who was the last person to know the location of Jasmine Pace's physical phone?
Well, I would assume she sent it and her mom got it.
No, I'm
but-
talking about the physical
Oh,
phone, the last time we
the
saw her
last
phone.
person, my best opinion is Jason Chen in the Walmart parking lot. That's where
Well,
it went
on
dark.
11/25, did you not testify that Mr. Chen's SIM
Oh, I
card
thought you meant when it was on the network.
went, okay, not when it was on the network.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
All right.
Up through the 28th, he's using it.
Mr. Chen's SIM card
Yes.
is in Ms. Pace's phone.
Yes. and
That's the
he's
last
actually
known
using it.
location.
Yes, the last known location is Nolensville, but it was active up through the 28th on that phone, and then it just goes, the end of the records kind of. I don't know what happened after that.
Nothing further.
Recross.
Nothing further.
Does the jury have any questions for Mr. Hamilton?
Anyone else?
Councilor Burke?
All right, Mr. Hamilton, the jury has a few questions, so I'm going to ask them if you can face the jury with an answer, please. Is it possible that there are individual iMessages missing or deleted from the conversation log submitted by the defense as Exhibit 222?
The paper printed version that they handed me, there could be pages missing, or I don't know the quality of that. I would need to.
Well, let's just assume for a moment that nothing was physically taken, but that is a complete set that represents the call log.
Yeah, you can, it depends on the make and model of the phone. You can delete some messages and they'll show deleted and that they were there, but not the content. I'm not sure on that exact make and model. I didn't see anything that said that, but we used to see it a lot. It would be able to tell something was deleted and the time and date, but not what was there. So, yes, there could be stuff deleted. I would lean on that.
When Jason Chen's iPhone was recovered from his parents' house in Nolensville, was his SIM card in it?
Yes, the correct SIM card was back in. I could see that it was in service up until 11/28. I don't recall the exact time, maybe afternoon, but there's no more records beyond that because that was the scope of the search warrant. You have to write a search warrant to get these records. They don't just give them to you. And the scope of it showed that was in service using her iPhone, his SIM card up through the 28th. What they recovered and actually processed, the cell phone download was the correct phone from the time of the crime and the correct SIM card back in it. So he put it back together, but he had to restore it from the iCloud, so it had at some point been erased.
I think within that answer, you answered this one, but just for clarity's sake, from the records, can you tell if and when Jason Chen's SIM card was put back in his iPhone?
No, because I don't have, the records would tell us, but they only go to the 28th, and at that point, it's still her phone. But yeah, but I think that was the scope of the warrant that was sent for the date range.
Do you recall any tender activity on November the 22nd, 2022, that is associated with Jason Chen from the report you reviewed?
Yes, we actually put that, I don't remember which number it is. Yeah. So there's a little bit, they're mostly cookies and things.
Yes.
Here you go, I'm sorry, I had it, 220.
Yeah, so there is some, and what I did was in the timeline, I did a search, and this looks through the whole phone, there's hundreds and hundreds of things in there. You can just say, look for Tinder, and it finds it, and so I did see cookies and things, so the app was running, and then you see actual messages. There is cookies, I don't see any actual messages going in and out, like he didn't send any, he didn't receive any on the 20th, but there's some cookies, so the app's running. The 21st, there's a token, it's a cookie. So again, he's not sending messages. The first actual time I see him send a message, so nothing but cookies on the 20th, the 21st, on the 22nd, I see zero activity, didn't even leave a line. There's no date for the 22nd. The 23rd is when he sends out a message that says, so I guess we're dating now. And then that girl answers back late that evening. So that was, he sent it out at 9:52 our time in the morning on the 23rd, 9:52 a.m. She responds back, ha ha, really, why is that, with a smiley face. She answers him that night at 9:50 our time. But there's a location of that. That's actually GPS. That's the only one I recall for this entire crime time. In his phone had one GPS, and it's from Tinder, and it's at 110 Tremont. And there's no activity on the 22nd at all, and there's cookies, but I don't see any messages going in and out on the 20th. So nothing on the 22nd, cookies on the 21st, and cookies on the 20th. And then he starts communicating with people the morning of the 23rd, and I see it on the 28th is the next one. It jumps 24 to 28.
Yeah, just for the jurors taking notes, can you let them know what exhibit number that is?
Yes, sir. That's exhibit 220. And something to remember, because you'll probably run into more of these. When you see UTC -5, that's Chattanooga time during this 11 November period. I don't think there is any, but if you see UTC 0, you need to subtract 5 from it. Because that's in Greenwich.
Are you able to explain why an area is grayed out on the report that's displaying Tinder activity with his number on it? It says grayed out, but you just explain what that is.
Those lines, that's the date. So that over here, you can't hardly see it, but over here's where it says like 12/20 or 11/21/2022. 11/23. So those gray bars are actually the date, and it separates that. That's a day. That's a day. That's a day. These might not be a full day because it may be off the screen, but yeah, that's the date bars. That's not great information. It's just separating dates for you. These are screenshots that program's huge, and the files that come off of it are big. These phones have so much data in them now that it's crazy. Some of them are up terribly.
All right, one of the jurors had a question about the content of the last 10 texts sent from Jason to Jasmine, and the last 10 texts sent from Jasmine to Jason. Another witness will answer that. Were you able to use Jason's phone to determine whether bank accounts linked to apps on his phone on his phone received deposits on or after November 23rd? Basically, did he receive electronic payments of any form from an account linked to Jasmine during that time?
I saw no evidence of that.
So this question referred to November the 23rd. I think it meant November 22nd, so we'll read it the 22nd. If I'm wrong, just raise your hand and let me know. Based on the GPS record on Jason Chen's phone on November 22nd, 2022, did he leave his apartment at 110 Tremont Street any time of the day before Jasmine Pace arrived at his apartment? I assume you meant November 22nd because that's when Jasmine Pace arrived at his apartment. Want me to read that again?
No, sir, I think I got the gist of it. So, one, just to be clear, the sales stuff we looked at is not GPS. GPS is really accurate. It would show exactly. That was the estimated location provided by T-Mobile and Verizon. So
they're estimated, they're not, global positioning system is a whole nother thing. That is what is on that tender line when he has that 9 o'clock in the evening on the 23rd, there's one GPS, and that is tender. That's very accurate. It puts him in the department. So there's nothing else in his phone during the time of the 22nd, 3rd, 4th. There's no GPS data in his phone. The cell records they use to map all that are estimated positions and locations and towers. So those are rough estimates and no GPS. But I didn't really look at. I started looking at his stuff at the time she arrives, late on the evening of the 22nd. That's where I start mapping his activity until basically the end of the records I had, which was the 28th. But yes, I don't know where he was. We do have some records in there prior to that. You could go back and probably see, but I was mostly interested from the time she arrived and from there forward.
Can you redirect from the state based on the juror's question?
I just want to clear one thing up, Your Honor. Can I have the projector? Just for clarity for the jurors, Mr. Hamilton,
Yes,
they
ma'am.
were asking about that grayed area. You let them know that the grayed area is just the new day.
It
And
is,
can you
yeah.
see the date over there to the left?
A little blurry, but yeah, so this just, that shows you that there's 8 items and it's 1123, and then there's 32, 1128. So that just separates the data sets.
You never,
And when you see over here, that tells you that's a real message, just an instant message. That meant that was outbound, it's from Jason, and there's a big content over here, so I guess we're dating now. And then it comes back, you know, at 9:50 that night, this Victoria girl answers and says, really, really high. By the way, these names have to be manually put in that phone, so I don't think that automatically pops up.
you didn't redact anything from this document, did you?
No, ma'am.
You didn't change
Absolutely.
anything, did you?
Absolutely not.
Nothing.
I just screenshot a little bit of my screen, and that's where that came from.
Thank you.
Can you recross?
Now, Mr. Hamilton, related to the Tinder app, Jason had the Tinder app on his phone, correct?
I didn't see it. I saw pieces of it.
You saw an extraction report.
Yeah, that had links to Tinder, but most of their cookies, and then there's some instant messages. But I didn't actually see the app, and it's not listed. So
Now, on the extraction report that the state provided.
yes,
Are you saying that you did not see that there were several messages?
I couldn't go into somewhere where it says this is Tinder, and I can look at all the messages. What I did was look through the background, and it pulls anything that's related to Tinder. And recalling that phone has been basically completely erased and then restored back to some point in time. And so I think there's things that aren't all there. But there's remnants of Tinder in there, and it's actually still in use, but I don't see like a category that's called Tinder where I just click on Tinder.
All right, so do you have any information related to,
It tells you what apps are on there, but I didn't personally go. I just did a global search to find everything related to Tinder, so if there's anything in there, it would find it.
Mr. Hamilton, I'm just gonna ask you a little
Sure.
different. At this point, I'm not asking for it to be admitted. You can just look at this.
Yeah.
That's right. Remember now, I haven't had much time to look at this phone because I was told not to look at it because the turn. So, yeah, I see.
Just hang on just a second.
You're right.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a few comments that have come out during the testimony about how Mr. Hamilton wasn't allowed to look at things. As you know, we have a lot of out-of-court hearings and determinations about things. Many times it comes to me first before either side gets to look at it fully. That's what it was in this case. The cell phone was something that's very voluminous and had a lot of personal things in it. So before it could be examined fully by Mr. Hamilton, it had to go through my procedure of looking at it. So don't hold anything about Mr. Hamilton's not being able to look at it against either side. It's simply a procedural thing. I just didn't want you to be confused about that. And I think that was shared. Make sure that it was that you didn't have the wrong impression about why Mr. Hamilton was not looking at it until very recently. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to retreat this from you. Just
Yeah.
looking at that.
So,
Is it fair to say that there was an extraction that showed that there was some tender activity on Mr.
oh yeah,
Chen's?
that's the prettier way of showing what I showed in that other spreadsheet. It shows the exact same messages, the exact same dates and times. But that's a lot easier to read. I didn't see that category, but there's hundreds and hundreds of them. The way I did it was did a global search through the whole phone, find everything related to him. So that's prettier. That's the little windows minor in lines, but what I just saw was the same exact messages. So I guess we're dating, and she answers him, and the dates and times match. And now you've brought out a ton of other tenders that I haven't really looked at because I was just looking at around the time of the crime. But yep, I agree. That's the same report, different format, different way of looking at it, same data. And more.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Brother John.
Do you have any follow-up questions for Mr. Hamilton? See you on.
Anyone else?
Around what time on November the 22nd do you see cookies from the Tinder app on Jason Chen's phone?
It is. Cookie pretty much just tells you the app's running. The one she has actually is really readable, but I see a cookie on the 21st, you said, Jeremy?
22nd.
Oh, 22nd. There is no activity at all on the 22nd. It jumps from the 21st. It jumps from 10:30 at night on the 21st. It jumps all the way to the 23rd, and there's cookies start showing up at 9:50 p.m. Actually, 09:50, so that would be, and then it goes on through the evening. But there is no activity on the 22nd. Not in my search.
Do app notifications create cookies?
They do. They can. Cookies are just little tidbits. They're tracking how often you go somewhere, and we actually do them all the time on our computers and apps run them. It's all they make money by knowing what you do and where you go. But yeah, it's just like a breadcrumb trail. So this one shows you. This is because I did a global search. It actually shows you cookies and things that don't show up when you just go under where a header that says Tinder, and it shows all the messages. This shows stuff in the background. So this is probably more thorough than what they were showing me, where it's in It just looks like a message, like you're looking at iMessages on a phone or text in order. It's not gonna show you cookies and things. So this literally shows you more, showing basically what day and times he's doing things. So you're able to do, even though there's could literally be millions of items in those phones, you can do a global search for things like Tinder, and it'll find everything to do with that.
Did you review records from Verizon that showed messages, text, or IM involving Jasmine Pace's phone prior to November 22nd, 2022?
I think there is some. I didn't look at them again. I was really focused on starting on the 22nd and going forward. There may be some.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot. It's not like you download the phone.
I think that answers this one, but I'll remind the jurors that you will have the messages back in the jurors so you can review them yourself. Do you recall seeing any messages related to a death in Jasmine Pace's family or similar to that?
I saw one that caught me kind of odd, like I'm sorry or something, but it didn't make any sense to me, so I didn't really focus on it.
Any redirect based on what the jury has?
Your Honor, if I can have one moment.
Yes, ma'am.
Related to that last question, Mr. Hamilton.
Yes,
This is Exhibit 219. I'm going to draw your attention to 1122 at 2212.
So 11/22, 22/12.
Will you keep the pointer there?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if that's the best way to do that.
It might be better if I can track.
Well, it's just so small, I'm not sure
Yeah.
how.
You can count which line down it is.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Judge. Let's do that. So let's see, 1, 2, 7. 7 lines down on this, on the left side, 7 lines down. Is that 2212?
Yeah, 7 is, well, you're counting 7 or 8, so it'd be 8.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah,
line
it's
number 8,
line-
that's
line
right.
number 8 is
Li-
the header, I think.
Line number 8,
Yes.
okay. And then, can you see line
Yes.
number 8 there?
Yeah, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. She's gone. That's what I remember seeing. I knew it was something, but I was like, because for just a moment when I saw it, I thought, oh, that doesn't sound right, but I don't think it's related to this. So she's gone. I'm so sorry.
Nothing further, Judge.
You recross.
I'm going to show you this exhibit again, 219.
Mm-hmm.
We're again going to go 8 lines down, right next to you in the message that says, she's gone.
Right. Right here.
Yes. Who does the phone number 423-883-2527 belong to, or do you know?
So if it's in the contacts, it would, on the phone, it would be on there, you can find it, but I don't know who it is.
Does this show, and I'm asking you to follow from the word, she's gone,
Yes.
over. Does it show that the sender is 664-2024 and that the receiver is 883-2527?
So the originator of this one is 2024.
And from what you've learned in the course of your investigation, is that Jasmine Pace's phone number?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that Jasmine's grandmother apparently died on the 22nd?
Absolutely never knew that until just this last few minutes.
Knowing that now, is it
Yes.
plausible that Jasmine sent a text message to someone owning 883-2527 saying she's gone?
Yes.
Then on the next line, does it show that that same number who had received the text of she's gone sends a message back to what we know as Jasmine Pace's number saying, I'm so sorry. I understand if everyone needs time, just let me know. We love y'all very much.
Makes sense. Makes perfect
Now that you know
sense.
about Grandma.
Yes. That makes good sense.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton,
Are you finished, Ms. Morrison? No.
I thought you said thank you.
Just what about that?
Thank you. That is all the questions I have.
Yep.
Mr. Hamilton, just to clarify, because I think I misunderstood the court's question. The text that says she's gone was not between Jasmine and Jason, is that correct?
No, it absolutely wasn't. I thought they were just asking about death or something in the text messages. And that one caught my eye for just a second until I started looking at it, and I thought, that's not related.
Sure, so I apologize. Those two messages were between Jasmine and someone else?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Jasmine was telling someone that she's gone.
yes. Like I said, on its face, when you're reading messages, that looks funny.
No.
Do you have any further questions for Mr. Hamilton? All right, thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you.
General Gardner, please.
Your Honor, the state would recall Investigator Crawford. Investigator Crawford, let's start with this. Why would your fingerprints be on Mr. Chen's vehicle?
Yes, so I want to say this is the first time in any of my investigations that my fingerprints have been on any other evidence that's been reported in Avis. On November 29th, 2022, I went to Nolensville, Tennessee, in an attempt to locate Mr. Jason Chen at his parents' residence at Ashburn Court, sorry. Upon the execution of the search warrant, originally prior to that, we met at Nolensville Police Department to link up with the Nolensville PD to include one of their detectives and members from the Williamson County Sheriff's Department to assist with the execution of the search warrant at the residence of Jason Chen's parents. We met up with them. We had tactical and strategic planning on the execution of the search warrant, trying to figure out the best and safest way possible to execute that search warrant.